Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast. Supplement. This is not the regular PlayStation podcast. I almost forgot to say that word. My name is Moriarty. I'm joined by storied game designer David Jaffe. Good to see you, my friend. How are you today? Good to see you.
I don't know how I am yet. I'm just waking up. I just popped the first ADD med. It takes about 20 minutes to kick in. And so, I wake up and I really don't know. I take about 20, 30 minutes to figure out what side of the bed I've gotten up on it. And it's too early to tell you.
Oh, interesting.
I dreamt last night, though. Oh, here's what I did. I dreamt last night. I say this like I actually had some active involvement. Here's what I did. I had a dream last evening that I was back at Sony Santa Monica. I dream about that building all the time.
Mm-hmm. The old one.
The old one.
Yeah.
The new one has no real emotional tie for me. I never worked there. But I probably, when I was younger, I used to dream about the house I grew up in, and I don't dream about that anymore. So clearly there was something I was mulling over in my subconscious that house represented, and I've dealt with that and moved on. Sony Santa Monica represents something for me in terms of that building and that time. And last night I had gone back and they were working on a new God of War, and it was very, amicable and stuff. It wasn't like a challenging dream or anything, but I remember this one point though, it was really cool. This artist, she was showing me this effect that she had done where when Kratos swings the blades, the visual effect, the particle effect was also reflected. And so he could swing his blades and he could use it to fight Medusa because he could see in the reflection of the particle effects, he could see where she was without turning the sun. And I was like, I don't know what that was about. But anyway, I'm good. How are you, Colin?
That's a really, really fun, dude. It's so funny. I'm well. I love talking about dreams. Do you read about them at all, or are you like into like any philosophical camp? Like, are you more of a Jungian kind of like mystic?
So, well, I mean, I do believe there is a collective unconscious. I believe that. I don't, and so I think there are symbols that do change over time. But some don't change at all that most people are connected with, and that this means that, and this means that. But the biggest, hang on, I got a sneeze coming.
No, please. I hate that.
It is. You got to look at if you look at the light, people say, and it does. So thanks. I guess. What does that even mean?
I know. Why do we say that? I'll talk to you.
I know why.
Well, I do too, but it's funny that we still say it, and then I still insist on saying it to people.
It's probably a decorum thing, though, at this point.
Then I get mad when people ignore me. Yeah. But then I'm like, why am I mad about that? Like, that person didn't ask you.
You sneezed. It's like,
Yeah.
Because didn't they used to say there was also that theory, not theory, but there was the historical, you would know this, like when you had an orgasm back in the day, it was like you were giving up a little bit of your soul.
I don't know anything about that. And
that's kind of where the bless you comes from with the sneeze as well, right?
It's like some sort of like violent exorcism or something or whatever. I don't know. As far as the dreams are concerned.
No. I want to go back to this because.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In my head, I have to finish the joke. It's not even a joke, but it's just like when you think about having sex with somebody and when you both come together and then you say, bless you, that's what you. Yeah, okay, that was worth the no. Okay, sorry, go back to dreams. Oh, right. So
yeah, go ahead.
No, so I definitely believe in that, the sort of collective unconscious stuff. And I also, though, I read a theory and I read it from a life coach. So I don't know if Martha Beck is the woman's name. I don't know if she invented it or she was sort of riffing on someone else's take, but her thing was, and this is, once I read this is kind of how I do my dreams. And it seems to be the most consistently helpful in analysis, which is she's like, you are every character in your dream. You are every aspect of your dream. So the best thing to do when you're trying to figure out what was that dream about, why did I have that dream, is to really kind of cast it and go, okay, well, what is the building Sony Santa Monica? What part of you is that? What was this artist about? Who is the artist in Sony Santa Monica that showed you that cool effect? And I have found when I go down that road of analyzing my dreams that way, it tends to yield pretty meaningful conclusions, I guess. I haven't analyzed this dream. I just had it. Sorry though, but that's my take. But I love dreams.
Me too.
I dream heavily. I dream vividly. I have dreams of dead people, and sometimes, and I don't know if I believe in visitation dreams at all, but it would surprise me to learn they're real, and it would surprise me to learn they're not. I'm agnostic on it, but I definitely have dreams about dead people that feel different. Where sometimes it's just like, I was just dreaming about my mom. And then other times I had a dream about a week ago where it was like, my grandmother on my mom's side, I just adored, but the grandfather and grandmother on my father's side, I loved, but they were too old by the time I was born. I didn't really get what was so great about them like the other kids did, the cousins and all that. But it was like we had a Jaffe family reunion. Everybody was there, including them. And I got to talk to them and kind of connect with them for the first time and go, oh, this was a really neat thing to talk to my grandfather that way. And it felt very accurate and real. But maybe it wasn't. But I'm so grateful for my dreams. It's a just delightful part of being I assume any kind of living or any kind of organism, but certainly human. I love them, man. It's like a little adventure every night. I'm like, where are we going? And I don't mean, I'm not trying to romanticize it. I literally, as I start to fall asleep, I say, ooh, what are we going to do tonight? Where are we going? And
how does this fit into your determinist worldview? Because it seems like do you believe that? So like you ate a cheeseburger last night, you had too much protein in your system. The protein indicated this thing to your body. And so you had this specific dream. Do you believe that sort of thing? Or do you think that it's more mystical than that?
I think there is no mystical. I think it's just stuff we understand and stuff we don't understand. So, I think there are things that we can connect with that feel mystical because we don't understand them. And I think that's fine. And I certainly experience that. But I think fundamentally, we know once we discover what's happening, it loses the mysticism. But no, I'm agnostic on every single aspect of existence, including determinism. I'm not saying when I heard Sam Harris talk about it, that was it for me. Unless new data comes along, I'm like, if somebody puts a gun to my head and says, is this do we have free will or not? I would say, well, if I have to make a decision based on what I've heard, I don't think we do. But, and I don't think anything about the way I dream or perceive my dreams negates that. If visitation dreams are real, that's kind of something happening outside of the realm of physics that we understand. I mean, then you're talking about afterlife and ghosts and, I don't know how that plays into it, but no, I don't. That's one of the joys of being agnostic, I suppose, which is like, I don't fucking know, but I do believe based on what Sam Harris said after that was the most definitive, compelling answer I've heard. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
He's an incredibly smart person when it comes to those very compelling cases he can make for those things. We can talk about it more maybe on your show when we talk in the coming weeks, but I've gotten really into, not really into, but I've really been attracted to more Jungian, like Carl Jung style dream mysticism, where his argument was, and I think he made this argument maybe in the psychology of the unconscious or something, was like, your dreams don't mean anything to anyone else. Like, for instance, Freud would say, oh, you dreamt about a bee? Well, that's what this means. Sure. And Jung would say, like, you dreaming about a bee is unique to you, and you need to figure out why you're thinking about it. And I've been really drawn to that because what I've noticed, and I don't know if you ever heard me talk about this, we might have talked about it on Constellation once because it comes up sometimes, and you might have been on there, is I have sequential dreams where I leave and come back to that place, leave and come back to that timeline. And the timelines are specifically,
how much is the gap that you have them? Like, you mean the next day, or
it's just, it's indeterminate. You just know that it's in the same place afterwards. Got it. Like, and what I've been fascinated by is why I dream about certain things and never dream about certain things. So the example I use, and I've talked about this before, is like, I dream about IGN a lot. Mm-hmm. I never dream about Kind of Funny. I dream about Northeastern a lot. I never dream about high school. I dream, and I don't mean this to be creepy because it's really not, but it's like my ex-girlfriend from college is in my dreams. The 2 girls I dated after her, nowhere to be found.
Right.
Very weird things that I know that you can go to like a Freudian or that like level of like, okay, what does that mean? I'm thinking about my college girlfriend or whatever. That means this is undone and this is this. And what Jung would say is like, no, like you got to figure that out for yourself. And
I thought Jung was very much all about the collective unconscious as well, though.
I don't know anything about that specific stuff. I know that his thing, what I've studied is like the mystic nature, the uniquely mystic nature of your own experiences is how I
have found, it's possible, I mean, no one knows really why we dream. The last thing I read about it sometime this year was like, oh, it's kind of a when your computer gets fragmented, and it's sort of it's a healing thing, and it's a thing that helps us, deal with shit. But at the same time, it's also just sort of the brain, just with the limits of reality removed for a little bit. That's what the brain looks like. It's just kind of like my brain without my medicine or something, Yeah. So I don't know anything about the reason we dream, but for me, I have gotten a lot of value utilizing that technique as well, which is like, what does this mean to me? Because, I can go, oh, if you dream about your old workplace, according to Freud, it means you're really hungry for protein. I don't fucking know what he says. And I'm like, okay, great. But if I go, Sony Santa Monica to me represents, like, here's what I'll tell you. I would say, because my house that I used to dream about all the time, I think represented a sense of security and safety that I felt as a kid. And it wasn't until I was able to replicate that to some extent for myself as an adult that I stopped dreaming about it. I think Sony Santa Monica probably represents to me a time where I was able to do exactly what I wanted, and there was also great success that came with it. And I think if I can replicate that to some extent, doing what I'm doing now, maybe I'll stop having that dream. But it's almost like that's the last time my brain or my soul got that particular piece or amount of nutritional type of nutritional value, whether it was security as a kid, whether it was success as an adult. And maybe it's my brain telling me what I'm hungry for. And it's not literal. It's not like I want to go back and work in video games. I want to go back and work at Sony Santa Monica. Shannon Studstill, who I'm still very good friends with, but I don't see her all that often, is in the dreams, in the way that she's working at Sony Santa Monica.
Right. No, I understand.
Well, I know, but the last time I was on this show, people were like, you have some kind of chat program or something. And I'm just like, dude, it's Alexa. Oh, shit, I just said her name. Never mind. Alexa, bye. Alexa, stop. Anyway. But the point being, though, is that I think with Shannon, she really represents that person for me that I felt close to and I had great affection for, but was also, I needed a producer, in my life. I needed that person at the work level to really bring out the best of me. And I'm probably pining for that as well, when it comes to what I'm doing now. So, I mean, when you have your dreams, when you say you look at them at more a personal level, are you able to sort of get that value out of them when you start to go, what does this mean to you specifically?
I think I understand.
What does IGN mean? I think I know, but keep going.
What I was going to say was, I mean, we can get into that. I think
I'm curious
because you were talking about things about Jung that I don't really know about. Like the only thing I really know about him that attracted me about him was the idea of individuation, which was like, we can look at ourselves as like, you can glean things off of each other about why you feel a certain way, but really you need to, like I said, probe deeply. So I've tried to like embrace that.
Okay.
And my dreams have urgency and in them, and some sort of like fear, unable to change the outcome of things. So one of the repeatable dreams I have, this is very weird, and this is what I was talking about sequential dreaming, is I'm in a Northeastern University like setting, but I'm taking high school classes, but you take them like college classes where like, if you don't show up, no one gives a fuck. Like no one cares. And I've dropped 2 of the classes in this timeline. Like I've returned and come back and returned and come back. And I keep asking myself in the dream, like, I graduated from this place. Why am I taking high school classes?
Are you knowing you're in the dream?
Yeah, like I'm the main character in the dream. And I'm like,
but do you know you're dreaming though? Is it a lucid dream?
No, it's not a lucid dream, but I can recollect it afterwards generally. I started writing a lot of the stuff down.
Yeah.
And it's so weird, by the way, dude, when I wake right up and I cannot write, like physically cannot write. Like it's so sloppy and fucked up. I'm a very neat writer, like a very specific way I write, and I can barely hold the pen dexterously or whatever. But
isn't that excellently cool though? I mean, I'm assuming what that is part of the brain is not online yet. It's like,
yeah, totally. Like I should show you like a normal writing sample and then a writing sample of me a minute after I got up. It's so funny. But what I've realized is that I think what I track is I think about things that are probably unfinished in some way. My career at Northeastern was unfinished because I was supposed to go to grad school, but didn't. My career at IGN was aborted because I could still be there right now if I wanted to be, but opted to leave.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. So the same thing with my girlfriend in college. And I'm not even saying like, don't make fun of me. It's like, it's not sexual. She's just in these things sometimes. And I've really identified that because it's like, dude, I never dream about the other people. And I never dream about being back in Bellport, my high school. But but I do dream, to your point, I dream about my childhood home. I dream about that neighborhood. It all seems like it's unfinished things that make me anxious. And I know that those experiences seem so real in my mind that I wake up anxious, like where your physiology is kind of half in that space, even though you know it's not real. And so, yeah, it's interesting that you're kind of caught in that world too, because I love it. I almost look forward to seeing what is going to happen in some of these things.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think part of it too is, I had sleep apnea for a while. I probably still do, but eventually they said, do this CPAP machine, which is what I sleep with now. And when I had the apnea, I wasn't dreaming, or when I didn't have the machine, I wasn't dreaming. And so they've really come back with a vengeance, which is wonderful. I'm so grateful for them. But I don't have nightmares. Like the only, when you say you wake up anxious, I have not had a genuine old fashioned nightmare in decades. I have things that are scary, but I tend to enjoy them. But the other, like about 2 weeks ago, I had a dream that one of my good friends said that they didn't want to be friends with me anymore. And that was I woke up and I just felt terrible. Like for a couple of hours, I was just like, oh my God, I know that wasn't real, but I still have the lingering stench of the sadness of that dream was with me for the morning. But short of that, though, I don't tend to take the emotional part. I mean, imagine that. Imagine the brain's crazy. Imagine the kind of mental, an accident someone could have at their brain level where, the emotions or part of the dream spills over into, quote, the real world. And they don't really even at that point understand anymore where one begins and when it's all crazy, man. It's so fucking fascinating to me.
It is.
That what's the tribe? They think the real world is the dream world. The waking world is the dream world.
Oh, I don't know anything about this. I don't think
you've not heard of this. Oh, it's a cult. It's a I'll look it up. I'll tell you later. But
it's like in a primitive culture or something somewhere.
Yeah. Well, yes, I don't think they're like an undisturbed tribe, but I do think they are still, active in their area, whatever that means, and I think they're aware of the real world and stuff, but that it's based on their past where they felt that. But I mean, there is, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I don't, I've never done DMT. I definitely want to do DMT badly. I just need to get myself in a situation where I feel safe doing it with the people I'm with. But I don't know what's going on. And if somebody were to say, well, this is kind of the time where you are experiencing quote reality. And then when you dream, you're letting go of all of the structure and you're just being with the isness of existence. Okay. I could buy that. But yeah, I don't know, man. I love it. I love the mystery of it all. It's a joy.
You'll find interesting people out there. People are like, can you talk about video games already? We will. You'll appreciate that I had this.
Yeah,
leave me alone. There. Leave me alone.
Why don't you just drive in? God, can you imagine if you said that as a joke and somebody did it, then you were in court? It's like, you told him to do this. And I was, dude, freedom of speech. Care, though. Yeah.
I will say that that I do have this one recurring dream where I don't have my passport and I'm trying to go to Russia for some reason. Like, we're going to Russia for a work trip. No, undescribed. It's always Russia. I really feel like a lot of it has to do with it just being in like
the news,
being talked about. But there's like this urgency of I am trying to pack and go and very last minute and then realizing, oh, I don't have my passport. And that has happened probably. I've had that dream probably 50 times in some sense in the last few years. So
those kind of dreams are terrible. I don't remember the specifics for mine, but I have a recurring like that where it's just like you're not. I think it's the test one. I think I know what it is. It's where you are trying to graduate and you're like, I haven't been to this class. Mm-hmm. I went to the first class and then I haven't been all year. And the test is. I'm like, shit. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have that a lot.
I think that gets into deep seated anxieties we all have about those experiences. It's so strange that we all share that, which is very anti-mystic in some sense. Like, why do we all have that dream? It's so strange.
I wonder if other cultures have that dream where they don't have the same type of school that we have in America. I don't know how much of it has to do with school and how much of it has to do with something else that gets triggered that feels like school. But yeah, I don't know. It's fucking cool. I love it.
We're up on
I had a show once. I was selling TV shows in college. I sold a couple of TV shows, and they were all like reality based. This was before. This was like back in 1994, and one of them that we sold was about dreams, and it was like every episode we would have a therapist, and then we would recreate with actors, kind of like, all the shows at the time were like recreation of this crime that occurred, but we would recreate people's dreams on film. And then the analyst would be with the studio audience and they would bring the person on and it would be like, hey, let's talk about what this means. Obviously never got off the ground. I sold shows, but none of them were ever made. I didn't realize that you can option TV shows, but doesn't mean you're going to get it made.
Right.
But I always thought that would be cool. Although I did have one executive tell me the problem with that is that most people's dreams are boring to everybody but the dreamer. I was like, yeah,
that's true. That's interesting.
Yeah.
The one thing that I love about dreams is just you were talking about like your grandfather earlier and talking to your grandfather. My grandfather died when I was 12, when I was young, and I barely remember what he sounds like or even anymore, or, you know what he looks like, but it's kind of fading. But then you have a dream sequence where it's like, holy shit. He, like, deep inside of you exactly what he looks like and what he sounds like, because there he is. And that's so interesting.
I still dream about my dad, a little bit about my mom, but my dad has come to me before. I'm using language that I shouldn't be using because it sells it in a certain way. But I had a dream about my father, and we would talk about him being dead. And, there was one dream I had where I was at a local park here in San Diego, and he and I were walking in the park and just talking about, him being dead and this and that and the other, and what's it like. And behind him were these two guys, almost like security, with white suits on. And I asked him, I said, well, talk to me. Is God a real thing? What's that about? And he's just like, yeah, I can't. And he motioned towards the guys behind him. He's like, it was clear there were things he could tell me and things he couldn't. And they were there to make sure that he didn't share the stuff that we're not supposed to know. And, you know, if I die and I realize that was real, I'd go, oh, okay, I get it. I'm very much of the mind that the reason we don't know what happens after we die is because I think we've talked about this before, that there would be like a mass suicide extinction event.
Right. And there's a movie about that, right?
It's a wonderful movie. Yeah. Robert Redford's in it on Netflix. But I think that is the most logical assumption. Why just, you know, I'm playing Dragon's Dogma 2. Oh, they just released the patch where I can start a new save. Cool. I'll do that because this is too hard. Who wouldn't, you know, I mean, it's like almost like whether there's a God or an afterlife or not, maybe it's just sort of evolution going, people knew for the longest time and we couldn't keep people alive long enough to procreate. So we evolved over time to, you know, not have that part of the brain be active. So the human race could survive. I mean, that requires a number of hoops you got to jump through, like, oh, animals did it, you know, but whatever. Hey, welcome to Sacred Symbols. Plus. We're here to, anyway.
One of my, one thing that's always given me pause is I take my mother's a very smart person and I take her very seriously, the things she says. And, I can't remember the name of the disease, so I'm sorry about that. But my mom had a very rare disease when she was 12 in 1962, and she was one of the first 50 people diagnosed with this, whatever happened in the world, and she almost died. And she did die, like, for a couple of minutes on the table, and they brought her back, and she straight up swears to God that they're like she was being brought into this, like, seeing the light, tranquil peace and all of that. And I'm like, damn, like, someone, you know, that like isn't a bullshitter or whatever. I'm like, I wonder what that's all about. You know, you saw a little piece of it and you were dragged back from it.
There are, there's a doctor at an American, it's not Johns Hopkins, but it's one of those kind of big medical school places. And, he's been doing a lot of science and research on this. And they recently released a study about the people with heart attacks that were clinically dead. And for the longest time, they were like, well, you're dead when there's no brain activity. But he was able to find brain activity that they had never been able to see before because of this experience. And he was able to start to figure out, he says, I don't know if near-death experiences are real or not, but we're starting to understand why they happen. And it's not because people say, oh, well, your mom must have been on medicine, and so it was like the morphine and all this shit. He's like, I mean, we're dealing with patients that are not having those situations, but they're still having these experiences. I tell you what, when we talk about God in the next 2 weeks, we'll fold all this in.
Yeah.
Because it's the shit, man. It's what a wonderful adventure to explore that stuff. I also have this sci-fi idea we should develop, Jaffe, of like, what if there was a secret lab or a group or whatever, and there were volunteers who were intentionally killed and brought back over and over again, so that they can garner more and more information about what happens when you go, and they try to get them closer and closer to the line, like try to study them. So it's like, we can bring them back at this very last second, and they'll come back and get them deeper and deeper into this world. And they come back with more and more information about it. It'd be kind of cool. A little nugget of something. Do you hate those people that when you pitch them an idea, they go, oh, it's like this?
No, I mean, that's important.
I do. I hate those people. Anyway. Yeah.
I don't know if that's like anything, but I think that's
exactly like Flatliners.
So there's already an idea about that.
Well, there was a movie about it from Joel Schumacher in the early 90s with Julia Roberts, Kiefer Sutherland, and then they remade it. And the original, I think, was great in the way the movie Dreamscape with Kate Capshaw and Dennis Quaid was great, but in that it was cheesy and it doesn't hold up, but it's still really interesting. Kind of like Altered States with William Hurt. But the remake of Flatliners, I think, was like a CW show, and it was like, But no, I mean, any story about death or trying to figure out what's going on, I'm all in. I will see it because I'm just like, but that's what they do. They're a bunch of medical students, and they basically take turns flatlining and then being brought back because they want to see what's on the other side. And it starts to kind of fuck with them, of course.
1990 film. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you saw Jacob's Ladder, right?
Yes.
With Tim Robbins. Ooh, Lordy. That'll scare you. That was a good one.
There was something scary about that era of like 1985 to 1995. There were like a lot of, I don't know if it's just because I was young and everything scared the shit out of me.
There was a turning from the kind of Reagan 80s, I think, of a lot of positivity on the screen and a lot of everything's just fun and stuff. And I think there was a maturing of the audience, maybe because of 24-hour cable news, or, I mean, I know this woman who teaches at USC, Rebecca Hendry. She's also a film director, directs horror, and she has a podcast about horror. But I've talked to her about it before, and I talked to her when the pandemic was happening because, she's very good at explaining, at least theorizing, when horror is riding a certain wave, how it ties into the cultural zeitgeist and what's happening in our culture to cause that shift in horror. Because horror is like really, one of the most key genres if we want to really analyze where humanity is at the moment. And so I'm trying to think in the 90s, what could it have been other than, we were getting a lot smaller as a world because of 24/7 news. And things were not as bright in the 90s as the 80s. The 90s were great, but things were, we had like Waco going on, and which wasn't like 9/11, but it was just, I think that maybe that's what it was. It wasn't that Waco was 9/11, but with 24/7 news, it was like a constant bombardment of anything that was sensational and felt really dangerous that was pumped into your home all the time.
Yeah. It's almost like you have a good point there where it's like Desert Storm, Ruby Ridge, Waco, Oklahoma City bombing, Columbine, like all of those things were
90s.
Yeah. Not very 90s. And like the things that were, I remember coming home from high school. I was in 9th grade when Columbine happened, and watching it on CNN. I have a vivid memory of that. Yeah. And not that I wasn't scared about it. For some reason, people think like, oh, it must have been so scary going back to school after that. And I'm like, it probably was for a lot of people, but at my school, which was a pretty bad school to begin with,
that's a Tuesday.
It wasn't really that. It wasn't until there was a ton of copycats later on. And by that point, I was out of high school. It was like, it seemed almost like a one-off crazy thing that happened.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting that you're bringing that because, we haven't had a school shooting in a while. And it's terrible to say it like that. Like I'm talking, we hadn't had rain in a while, but I mean, we were getting them, and I hope that doesn't, there are people out there. It's like, don't say it. You've jinxed it, but yeah, I mean, my kids are both out of high school now, but I would drop them off every day and just be like, this could be a day where this shit goes down. And I'd always tell them, I think they thought I was joking, and I kind of was, but every time they get out of the car, I'd shout serpentine, and it was just like, if someone's shooting, yeah. And they're like, oh, you're an idiot. I'm like, I know, but just remember, because I knew it would get into their brain. It's like, don't make yourself a target. Just zigzag, baby. Terrible. It's horrible. It's horrible. But
all right. That was a fun half an hour intro. I'm sure I'll timestamp it so everyone can just be
do you get it? Do people, I've seen people comment on your show where they love those intros, and then they also get really fucking like, dude, what the fuck?
I think it makes our show severely inaccessible, but I think it has a deeply hardcore audience of people that love it. And I'd rather have them than.
I think the timestamps solve it though, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
in some sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about games. What are you playing these days?
Everything, but I mean,
you play so many games, don't you?
Yeah. And I love that, but I also hate that I rarely finish anything. But I'm Maniac just came out. Maniac is this game that's like a cross between Grand Theft Auto 1 and Smash TV and PlayStation's Loaded, and they call it like all that mixed with Vampire Survivors. It's very bubblegum. You know, after you do a couple runs and you're done for, you know, at least a couple hours.
Yeah,
but
I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, it's really fun. But I'm playing mostly. I have absolutely fallen in love with Dragon's Dogma 2, and you know, Dragon's Dogma 2. The first day it was getting hit with a lot of controversy. I put up a video and I ended up taking it down because there was a lot of misinformation out there, and I think I was contributing, not at the level that actual big sites and stuff do, but to my audience, I was contributing to it, and I didn't understand it because there were journalists that were writing reviews about it that was like, people were going, that's not how it works, that's not how that mechanic works, and then Steam was giving it shit like mixed and negative reviews because of all the microtransactions. But there was just and then the director went on record a couple of weeks before it released saying, I don't want to have fast travel in my game because the whole point of it, is that it should be fun to go from point A to point B, and if it's not, that's a deficiency. But then the game launches and they're selling you fairy stones that let you let you fast travel. And it's like, well, wait a minute, was he lying or was he strong armed? There was just a lot surrounding it. But once all that kind of abated and people said, Jaffe, just give it a shot. You've already bought it. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I have Elden Ring right now is my favorite game of all time. This may
really
overtake it. Yeah. This may overtake it because, I okay, give me a minute. So I grew up loving sword and sorcery stuff. I played adventure on the Atari. That was my gateway drug into games, and more importantly, adventure games and escapism and all that shit that games provide. I loved wizardry. I loved, even though I didn't play Dungeons and Dragons because I didn't have anybody around me that played it, I bought the books and I bought the campaigns because I love the art and I love to read about them. I was just all in, and I wanted to live in those worlds. And Dragon's Dogma 2 I've never come closer to that dream than Dragon's Dogma 2. And what's really fascinating about it are the AI that follow you around, because it feels it's weird. Like I want to analyze this on an episode soon, but when you have 3 other people with you that are real people in a co-op adventure like that, it wouldn't land. Because the 3 other people are real, and in between fighting the dragon and figuring out how to deal with the dragon, you're like, oh, dude, did you watch the fucking San Diego and March Madness last night? Would have been, and right. It's so, and it's not that it's consciously derailing the immersion, but it just does, it's just it's just what it does. And these AI characters are so well done in the game, the pathfinding, and they have repetition. Eventually it'll be replaced, I hope, with AI, Chat GPT stuff. So they'll be able to actually comment more in real time, but they pathfind great. They really help you. It'll be like, hey, I see this. And if you give him the right button, he'll lead the party for a while to show you where a treasure chest is that he saw in his previous adventures and all this. And it really feels, between that, the open world, the graphics, the fact that the monster fights are really fun. They're not like Souls monster fights. It's more hack and slash, but you can like climb on all the monsters, and it's kind of like a real fast action Shadow of the Colossus when that stuff happens. It feels like one of those worlds that it's like, man, I just wish I could give myself a weekend to not work and just lose myself and play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I'm sure I will do that, but I don't give myself those sessions anymore. That's what I'm playing a lot of, but I'm still playing Unicorn Overlord, loving that. There's a bunch of stuff that's not finished, and I heard that you had
I heard you had a really fruitful Unicorn Overlord conversation on Summon Sign.
Oh yeah, it was.
By the way, you've been getting great compliments about your more reserved nature in your.
I don't like those people who give me the. I'm kidding. It's really yes, and I appreciate that, and I've seen those comments. I did a show last night for 4 hours that was just a live stream. Here's what I've realized, Colin Moriarty, is that the content I do needs to conform to the format that I'm doing it in. And that was like a revelatory thing for me a couple of weeks ago, because I've changed a lot of my content and shows based on that. So when I do like a hangout stream, then I'm just like, fuck it. I don't give a fuck.
Sure.
Because people, I think that's how people consume those types of shows. If you consume a live stream, you're doing other stuff. It's on because you like the company of the people that are there. You like to hang out with them. And it's not as important to have a structured, scenario list. But I think when you're talking about, hey, I turned on this podcast, you talk about video games, you can deliver that in a very different way. And also, to be perfectly frank, I mean, summon signs, I saw one of the comments where the guy said it's nice to hear video game content that's not about the drama of the industry, that's just about the games. And I've been feeling that more and more and more just in my own content and my own consumption of content, that I finally I think I'm full up on the console war content and Phil Spencer's content and Sweet Baby Inc. I mean, I can talk about it and there's some more stuff that happened today, but there's a point where it stops being relevant and interesting and it just becomes grifting. And I'm just like, that feels shitty. I don't want to be a part of that, So
I agree. I totally agree with that sentiment. Because I think these conversations, all of them are important and even vital. Like, someone has to have these conversations.
Yeah.
I question why certain players are on the field talking about these things when I think, and so it could be the console war stuff or Phil Spencer or whatever, when they clearly don't belong in those spaces and don't know what they're talking about. So in the fanboy space, for instance, I see that a lot. Like, people don't know what they're fucking talking about. They don't know how games are made. They don't understand anything about corporate America or corporate global, economies. And there's no curiosity, and that kind of poisons the well. And with the Sweet Baby Inc. and like all the racial and whatever gender stuff, it's like, that's an interesting conversation. I feel like they're worth having. I just don't like how some of the people in it are talking about it. And I think that it does come off as grifting. Like, and I also look at it as, and I'm not going to call out any names specifically, but
I will.
But it's like, I see people, do whatever you want. It's like, there are people where their interpretation of events or even of video games where I'm like, you're so deeply wrong about this that I have no idea how you can have credibility on other things. So a good example of this is, I saw one of these people that are talking a lot about this say, like, called Helldivers anti-political, Helldivers 2. And I'm like, dude, if you really that's a
level of idiocy that like, I mean, come on.
Helldivers 2 is one of the most political video games I have ever played. Yeah. Period. In everything, every piece of it is political. And so when I see something like that, I'm like,
consciously political, right? Well,
right. Oh yeah.
Consciously ripping off a political film that was obviously consciously political, whether or not the guys at, what are they called? Arrowhead?
Right. Arrowhead.
Whether or not they've also dove deep into anything beyond the surface of riffing on Starship Troopers, I don't know. But even if it's just adjacently related, it's political, because that thing's got politics oozing out of it. I've never read the novel, but the movie certainly.
Oh, the novel's so good, dude.
Yeah.
And it's totally different. The movie's an intentional bastardization of the novel. In a lot of ways, I would be curious.
Are they saying political standard statements, or it's very different?
Not at all. Like, a lot of people think that the Heinlein original book from '59 is like deeply fascistic, in fact. And so, like, now I don't read it like that. I think it's anti-communist. I think it's clearly an anti-communist book, but not a right-wing book necessarily. It's only 200 pages. You should read it at some point.
Yeah, I actually will.
And
I have forgotten about it.
Yeah, and it's really, really, the first chapter is awesome because it's about how, like, it's about a battle that the troops are like dropping into, very Helldivers like, and like all cool about it. And so I see, it's not that you're not entitled to those opinions. You can think that, but that's akin to saying BioShock is anti-political. Like, it's almost, it's completely, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's, I read I've had bad takes before, but every once in a while, certainly, and I'm sure people will remind me of them, but that's a take so bad that I can't believe it would be earnestly. I can see in like a conversation you kind of fleshing that out and then coming to a conclusion or whatever, but just clearly saying that, I'm like, eh. So when I see people like this, I'm like, you and I are not on the same page. I believe that a lot of these racial and gender-based things are bad. I think that a lot of them are done, and I think a lot of it is racist, overtly racist, a lot of it against white people, frankly. But I don't think that you're the right messengers for these things because you want something that I don't. You want an unpolitical or depoliticized games industry. I don't. I want a games industry that has deeply political games. I just want it to be welcoming to all viewpoints. And so when I've said over and over again about the sweet baby stuff on Sacred Symbols, we haven't really talked about it too deeply, but I'm like, I have no desire personally of pushing them out of the industry. It's like they can do whatever they want, free associate with whoever they want. No one's holding a gun to anyone's heads.
Same now, with what are they called? BlackRock. Same with BlackRock. You're
right. And I know a lot of people are saying ESG plays a lot in this, like, so it's like tax money and write-offs and, infusions of capital and all that. And it's like, okay, but generally speaking, I just want to exist also. And, in the space. So like that's my outcome. And I think a lot of these people are just almost too militant for me. So
I don't think they're militant. I think they're not educated enough. Right. So, let's take the Helldivers thing. It's not that the person thought it wasn't political. It's not that the person didn't understand the Starship Trooper riff and what Verhoeven was saying in that movie and what, related they're saying in the game. It's the fact that they simply didn't see the evidence of things that they have been conditioned to think of as political, which is, I don't see no ugly women in it. I don't know if anybody is black or brown or Jewish or white or, it's all this surface stuff that for them, that checks the box of not political. And it's like, you don't even have the right definition of what is political to identify what's not political. It's like that's the absurd part, because when you ask them, like, what is the opposite of what would be their version of Sweet Baby Inc? It's like, what do you want then? Are you basically, and they'll come back and say, we just don't want it to feel forced and all this stuff. And that's fine, I guess. But it does feel like you're not really debating and discussing it with people that really have they're not, you can say they're not serious, and I think there's truth there. I think it's just that they're coming at it emotionally first, and so they miss a lot, like the ESG stuff, right? Like, so the thing I keep asking these people that are convinced that this is happening, and it might be happening, but in terms of like, BlackRock, it's like, Sony, we won't recommend you to our investors if you don't do this, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, well, if that's the case, do we have any evidence of that happening at Sony? Is there a document? Has somebody reported on that? It's probably public knowledge that I don't even know if BlackRock has Sony in their, any of their particular funds, but have they lost that tax incentive now because Stellar Blade comes out next month? Stellar Blade's got TNA all over the place. It's clearly made for the male gaze, for the straight male gaze. Does that mean you're going to see a quarterly drop in profits because they've lost a percentage of investment from, where's that analysis and where's that evidence in this complaint? If that doesn't exist, then are you guys just making shit up and going, this is what we think could be happening? Do you know if there's any proof? And I'm not saying I wouldn't be surprised, but do you know if there's any proof that the companies that get thrown under the bus, like a Sony or even Xbox right now, are acquiescing to a list of demands in order to get specific incentives from these funds?
I don't know. So I can answer half that question in that I don't know what they get on the other end of it, but I can tell you, and I've told the audience before about this, and we might have even talked about this, is that when I wrote Super Perils of Baking, I had to remove a reference to Taiwan in the game to get it released on a PlayStation console. Like so there are things like that are happening for these nebulous reasons. It's like, okay, so, and I don't know if that's so nebulous. It's like, we want to do business in China. We want to have no business.
Yeah, I don't think that's BlackRock or DEI.
No, it's not. But what I'm saying is that it is squeezing like a terms of service or extracting certain things out of people in order to get onto the marketplace. And that's a small example of that. And by the way, Microsoft and Nintendo didn't make us do that. So the same in those?
And that's been happening since I worked in games in '95. There's always going to be the corporate structure that pays for your game, that owns the game, that says, we want this because we're paying for it and it's ours. And
right. But if you stretch it out beyond the bounds of like the specific example, doesn't it kind of meet what you're saying? It's like, we want to do business in China. We can't have this stuff. Arc System Works removed all the references to Taiwan and stuff in the BlazBlue mythology as well. And people were wondering why they did that. And we kind of reverse calculated it and figured out why that was done. So I'm just saying it's kind of a similar extraction of social or governance or like geopolitical value out of a creative choice. It's not happening at the barrel of a gun because we just didn't have to put our game on there. I'm not saying they're wrong to even want to do that or protect their walled garden, but those kinds of extraction, I'm not crazy about.
I'm not. Well, the problem with that, though, is that it makes this assumption that there is this world where commercial art and entertainment has ever been made in some vacuum where it's just the purity of the artist's soul and desire. And there's always what these people would call censorship from various cooks in the kitchen, whether it's because you want your game on PlayStation or whether it's because the CEO has a relationship with Bobby Kotick and you had a little veiled fuck you Bobby Kotick Easter egg in your game, whatever it is. That's always been the case when people are paying for your creativity. I mean, they may just not like now. What they should be saying then is that's always the case. And we didn't mind it when it was not putting out messages we didn't like, but now that they're messages we don't like, we have a problem with it. And that's a fair thing to say, but say that. Don't act like suddenly there's this new, Dark Lord of the Sith that has come onto the scene called people who have the money ultimately determine the content. And that's what you're really mad about. You're not mad about that. You're just mad about the fact that now the content is content that you find challenging, troubling, offensive, or whatever, because where were they complaining about it? They talk about this heyday, like, oh, it wasn't like this in the PS1. Well, I mean, it may not have been Sweet Baby Inc., but I had bosses telling us what we could and couldn't put in the games. I had to remove in Twisted Metal 2 a character who was clearly an evangelical preacher, and we had to change him from that. We had to change the dialogue to call him an evangelist or something like a TV evangelist, something where he wasn't affiliated with the church, because he was killing babies in the baptismal. But I get it. If I was making a horror movie, I'd be like, what are you kidding me? But I was making a video game for PlayStation in 2001, and that was a bridge too far for them, and it was their game. So you can say that, they censored Jaffe. Well, that was the deal I made with them. They also paid for my insurance and paid for my salary and let me have 99% of every creative thing I ever wanted. They get a couple gimmies, but I find it disingenuous, I guess, because what they're really arguing about, they should just say what they're really bothered by, which is we don't like the current direction of the games, but don't blame Sweet Baby, don't blame BlackRock. They're just working as private companies doing what they want to do. And trust me, if Spider-Man 2 selling great, but maybe other games aren't. And I mean, I do get the sense that maybe the worm is turning a little bit where enough people out there don't like it that they'll kind of peel back a little bit. I mean, I don't know. What do you think of this Microsoft thing? Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, we can go on about all of this stuff as deeply as you want. And it's good preparation because we're going to do a Sacred Plus. I have a producer from a pretty big company coming on, Hogue from a legal standpoint, coming on, which is going to be great, and a couple other people, and we're going to talk about this whole like Sweet Baby, just to have like one big episode about it and just get it out of the way.
Please ask somebody on that panel for some evidence of, because I'm not denying it. I'm saying that wouldn't it be great before we continue to throw individuals under buses of going, this is what Sony gets from BlackRock and this is what Sony has agreed to do, or anyone that gets on the investment sheet has agreed to do to be on the investment sheet, instead of just all this crazy shit that no one has any evidence of.
We really, I really think we're going to get to the bottom of some good stuff, because it's going to be Gene from like a journalistic angle, Hogue from a legal angle, and my friend Jason, who works at a big publisher, to talk about it from the games development angle and see if we can come to some sort of conclusion. Because my whole greater take on this is simply that, I mean, it's multifaceted, Jaffe. It's like, there's a great example that people always use of like, look at Metroid, and people kind of make fun of it. It's like Metroid, the original Metroid, and how it's a woman and you don't know it until the end.
Yeah.
And people are like, imagine if that happened today or whatever. And I'm like, but we liked that. Like, we liked Ripley or whatever in Aliens, and we liked like the entire situation in Metroid, and we enjoyed Barrett in Final Fantasy VII, and we whatever, like, and all the crazy shit, like the racial shit in Street Fighter 2, and we weren't aghast by it. Even if it was cartoonish, sometimes we embraced it. And I do feel like there's this idea that games were at one point like the old boy white club, and I'm like, I feel like it was always the club of the outcast. I always feel like it was the club, like in my experience, it was multiracial with some girls. My sister Allie is a huge player of video games, console games. And I feel like people are trying to rectify in some sense, like a situation in the media, in the industry that never really existed. And that seems like that's heavy traveler energy to me. That's like, you just got here and you're assessing it from a very broad level, but you were not in the trenches. And it didn't seem like there was real racial or gender animosity in games when I was coming up.
Okay. Yeah. But all those examples you cited though are very, like Samus, whatever the fuck her name is. It's Samus. Can they fucking spell her fucking name like a real fucking man? Anyway, so she takes off her suit though. Isn't she in her underwear?
Yeah, she's in a bikini.
I mean, come on. And then Ripley is fucking hot as shit in the first Aliens, walking around in her underwear, and Barrett is, you know, half a step away from being a character on Norman Lear's Good Times. You know, I mean,
in the original, you mean, or do you feel that way in the remake?
Even the new one, he's still, you know, there's a movie that just came out called, it's something about it's something of the magical Negro. And it's kind of
I saw the trailer for that.
Yeah. The idea of sort of like, you know, the black folks are okay when they are playing that sort of gentle giant, you know, he's rough around the edges, but he's got the heart, you know, like, you know, what's the guy in Shawshank Redemption, the big dude who was also in God of War. Anyway, the point is, and I'm not saying I didn't like those characters either, but you know, to be fair, they weren't nuanced looks. I mean, nothing was nuanced, but certainly those were very broad stroke characters of like, it's a girl, but look, she's in a bikini. You know, it's a black guy, yeah, but you know, he's like the guy in Interstate 76. He's got the big afro, and he's like Bootsy Collins with the glasses, and he, you know, there's a point where I think you go beyond that for people who find that acceptable, and you say, okay, but now we want to get out of the cartoony realm of showing people who aren't usually referenced in games. And I think that's where they start to have problems. Or maybe they start to have problems when they feel that it's preachy, but then you have to debate, is it preachy to everyone, or it's just preachy to you because you find it so unique and different to have someone come to you and say, women are more than just that. Women can be that for you. And there's nothing wrong if it's consensual for a woman to be all about being hot as shit. I can't wait for Stellar Blade, not just because she's hot, but that's a nice thing to see, is sort of an overt sexually, you know, over the top game.
I like that they leaned into it. I think it's awesome.
Too. Yeah. I love it. But that doesn't mean that there's not also value in, you know, having very realistic, or not realistic, but attempts at making characters that have more in common with actual women and their successes and struggles. And like you're saying, make it every game's political, whether it wants to be or not, but consciously political about what it means to sort of deal with being, you know, in a patriarchy and whatnot. I mean, I think there's room for both. And I know a lot of these people feel like they haven't gotten that, and maybe it's just because they play on console. I don't know, but I can go anywhere and get anything in games. I mean, I talked at the beginning of the show about Maniac. Maniac has no politics, but it's like it's falling down with Michael Douglas. If you want to just go out and kill, I mean, you literally, I got shit in the past for tweeting about, hey, if you could get a trophy, but you had to go into like a minority nightclub.
Right. I remember this. Yeah.
LGBT or whatever. Would you do it? And people came at me like I was suggesting they should go actually do that in real life. And I said, no, I was trying to assess, have NPCs gotten to a point where they cease becoming mechanics and where you can use to succeed, and they become, more emotional things that you don't want to do. And I thought it was a good discussion. Well, Maniac literally is, if you kill like 20 babies, you unlock a character. If you run over a bunch of school kids coming out of a school bus and you do that 20 times, you unlock a bunch of weapons. That's what the game is. And I'm not like complaining about it, but it is. If you love video games and you love them beyond just being a player, but as somebody who just loves the medium, you have to come to the point where you start to question, when does the abstraction of the mechanics give way to the emotions that are tied to the visuals that are slathered on top of those abstract mechanics, and which is more powerful? And what causes that to shift? Is it graphic fidelity? Is it your own personal life? Like when you're 12, it's fun to go into a school in a video game and shoot everybody up. But then when you actually know that happens in real life and you have kids, you're like, ooh, I don't want anything to do with that. Why would we not be having those discussions? But, people get really upset because I don't know why.
Well, I think I remember that, that minor drama or whatever around the trophy, but people weren't mad about that. They look at it as I look at people as being more calculating than I've ever looked at them before. And I think
consciously calculating.
Yeah. In some way. I mean, I think you have to be a fucking idiot to think that you were telling anyone to do those like, you have to be truly touched to think that. It's like, he's obviously talking about like, what would you do for this fucking accolade? How inhuman would you act in the digital realm to get this stupid thing that people care about? It's so, God forbid anyone says anything interesting. The only people that get mad at that stuff are the people that would never say anything interesting ever. They would never say anything interesting. So I wouldn't worry about them too much.
Oh, I don't worry about them. I find them good for content.
No, they are good. Now, the other side of the coin, because I was saying that there was more than one thing that I think is interesting to this. So I already kind of laid out, I think that there are a lot of travelers in our space that are making it seem worse. That's my opinion than it was. I don't feel like a lot of these conversations were happening. I don't think anyone gave a fuck when Terminator was, the Terminator series heavily featured a woman. I don't think anyone gave a fuck when Alien heavily featured a woman. I don't give anyone give a fuck when Metroid had a woman, Tomb Raider, whatever. I don't give a shit. I was there. I remember. So it's not like people, in fact, it was kind of attractive to it, not because they were attractive women, because I was like, oh, it's different. It's the same reason why Battlestar Galactica is so appealing to me, because it just reduces it to one gender, basically. Like everyone's called sir. They all live in the same barracks. There's a sexuality to it, but I like the kind of reduction of that, and it seems very futuristic and sci-fi. So I feel like there's that angle to it, which I think is unfair, and I also think that, the other part of it, I guess I want to say, is there's this. Unlike, I guess, the original Gamergate, which I found exhausting personally, what's clear 10 years later, Jaffe, is that the powers that be are not the powers that be anymore. And I think you were kind of touching on this about people getting it seems like there's a number of people getting upset, and then maybe there's a paradigm shift happening or something. The journalists and like kind of the mainstream media and the people that kind of want to misrepresent things, or because I think a lot of this comes from that Kotaku article, which, about Sweet Baby Inc. that failed to cite, to be fair, how it all began, right? And it just gets into it being a harassment campaign, but it ignores that guy tried to get that person banned from Steam, that guy tried to get that guy banned from social media, that guy tried to get, potentially thousands of dollars, that guy's games taken away from him. That's ignored completely. It's very political, because it's very classical American political, because it's like, oh, you did that dishonest thing. Now I don't really believe anything you do or say. And because you can't even I typically feel like when I am saying something controversial, I try to position it by letting you know that I know the certain holes in the argument, and that I know the other side of the argument, and acknowledge it. Pretending that it's not there, I think, is very destructive and weird. And I think people have picked up on that in some way. And it's so strange to watch the powers that be flounder. I think this is half the reason why this has legs, is because it seems like it's a real nail in the coffin, one of them, of a Kotaku or a whatever, that is in a different position of power today than they were 10 years ago. And that to me is almost the more fascinating part of it.
Well, the fact that they're kind of pivoting now, right, to be game guides and stuff.
Yeah, it's like now it's going to be an SEO farm, and that's the way to survive, because they thought, isn't it peculiar, Jaffe? Like, who's a Kotaku reader, a Kotaku fan today? I try to remind newer gamers or people that weren't in the scene, like, there was a time when Kotaku was well liked. People do forget about that. And I feel like they had some really good writers. Obviously Jason Schreier, Totillo, Crescenti,
Brian was, absolutely.
And so, and they used to break news. You'll know this because you were at Sony at the time, that like Sony blacklisted Kotaku for years for leaking PlayStation Home and doing all sorts of crazy shit. And they had something to say, and they had a voice, and they had a presence.
And I mean, they were wrong in a lot of ways, but
certainly.
But you can search up Jaffe Kotaku. There's a audio with me just yelling at Stephen Totillo at DICE one year. It was me, Ben Kachura, and Stephen Totillo, and they had accused me of being a misogynist. And somebody recorded it, I think it was Ben, and it got up on the internet. You can still hear it today. I mean, they weren't Kotaku like today. They had an agenda and they had a perspective, but they were still, I still respect Totillo. I still very much like Crescente. I don't give a shit about Jason Schreier. I could, don't like the guy.
No, I don't like Jason Schreier either, but I respect the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm with you. And Kotaku did sort of become something else. And I don't know if it was on the road to success. And then, I mean, clearly they were making enough money, I guess, to be able to continue to be that kind of journalist place. But
it's like, who the fuck are it's so strange when you go look at their masthead or you read who's there. It's like, who the fuck are you people? Why do you think you get to talk so derogatorily and aggressively towards people? You've taken a website that was at one time prolific and helped destroy it. Now, it could be the inexorable trends of the internet too, but you haven't helped in any way, shape, or form, to the point where you're a joke, And to me, there's that one writer over there that's heavily involved in this, and I was looking at her Twitter account, and she's been having like a weeks-long public meltdown, basically, over this stuff. Yeah. And it's like,
that's still going on, or you mean a couple weeks ago?
I mean, it was as of like a week ago. I haven't really caught up with it since. And I just think it's so I heard someone say this about Trump recently, where it's like Trump couldn't ask for better enemies, because even though he's a weak figure himself, his enemies are they're just so inept and dumb in a lot of different ways. And that's the way I feel about this situation, where it's like you have this kind of strange situation with, I think, miscast players representing the case against an incredibly weak adversary that anyone can just poke and tip over like a house of cards. And so I think that's what's kind of feeding this, is that no one's really bringing their best to this conversation, And I don't want to make, just to be clear, I don't want to make it seem like I'm dismissing what people are saying, because I'm not. I do think that the people that focus on their race and gender as the be all end all are the most fucking boring people and the most lame people with nothing interesting to say. Do not get it mixed up. So I'm not falling on one side or the other on that. What I'm saying is that we need to have better conversations and discourse in order to get to the bottom of this. And the only thing that's keeping this discourse going is how poor in representation the adversary is, where like anyone can beat them. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't have a better conversation anyway. Go ahead.
I think you're right, but I think the only reason the conversation has the legs and the pull that it does is because it is being sensationalized and it is being turned into more drama than that's really there. Because the minute you actually apply logic to the Sweet Baby Inc. thing, and you just really sit down with somebody who comes in with an open mind, and you're like, here's what's going on. Let's find out how the ESG thing really affects these specific companies. Let's figure out who in the industry you do believe, because there are a lot of people, whether it's Insomniac or Microsoft with their whole thing coming out about what they revealed at GDC. They are saying, look, we're not forcing anybody to do anything. We are basically, at least Microsoft saying that, we're like, we want our teams to have the opportunity to be aware that there's a lot more of an audience we can serve, and here's some ways to do it. Whereas Insomniac is point blank coming out and saying, they're not telling us what to do. We hired them. We enjoyed working with them. So at some point you have to ask yourself, who are you going to believe in the industry that's not carrying water for your quote side? And maybe there's no one, but you got to get all that on the table and then go, let's look at it rationally. And I think the minute you do that, the drama goes away. And so I think the minute the drama goes away from this, it becomes a non-story. No one, you think most people are really interested in solving this? You have all the most video games do not do what these people are saying. Some do maybe, and some are just badly written. But, you can complain all day about Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2's on track to outsell Spider-Man 1, and it hasn't even been on the market for a year. Clearly, most people don't care. If that, most people either do care and like it, or they don't care and they don't notice it. Stellar Blade's coming out. You got your TNA, relax. You also have Pornhub, by the way. I've never understood these people, but whatever.
But here's the Pornhub's banned in Virginia, by the way. I know,
and a couple other, not just Virginia. It's like Texas, Virginia, and I can't imagine that's going to hold up in the Supreme Court, but we'll see.
The governor here in Virginia yesterday just also vetoed the commercial legalization of marijuana that had passed the House a while ago. So I have medical marijuana here, and that's been legal for a long time, but they were about to. So they did all that. It's an interesting place where red meets blue here in Virginia.
Yeah.
But I feel like there is something deeply wrong with the ham-fisted nature of the way that a lot of representation is.
Sure. But isn't that just bad writing?
Yeah, totally. But I think that I would suggest that this is what bothered me about Sweet Baby when I first reported on it, and I haven't really talked about it too much since, which was just lean into it. We know what you are. So when you say that you're not like Sweet Baby Inc. isn't a diversity inclusion, kind of thing, an equity program, and that you're not going around, it says it on your website.
Yeah,
this is what you do to your script. So why are you pretending that's the kind of shit that bothers me? It's like, not that you can't, and that was what they were doing, and that's what I talked about.
Pretending that they're not doing that?
Well, yeah, they scrubbed I don't want to say they scrubbed it. I want to be, they, as I understand, rewrote a lot of some parts of their website to make it seem like it was less about that. And I just think that when you have a politically homogenous group like that, obviously there's no Trump voter in there. It's like if it was all about writing, then you would have just the best writers. And I would contend that they're probably not very good writers. I mean, because if your instinct is that like you have to be a certain thing to write a certain thing, I think that's so crazy. And I also think it's crazy to say that you can't truly relate with fiction unless you're what that person is. I think it's totally bonkers and weird. But I also get mad about the ham-fisted nature. It's like, to be perfectly respectful, if I see one more fucking rainbow flag anywhere, like, I'm going to lose it. It's like, how much. And by the way, this is something I feel about the American flag. Mike and I have this conversation where I'm like, why are we doing the Pledge of Allegiance at a football game before the football game? Like, why are we doing all this?
Or in school, public schools.
Right, I agree. It's like, why do we have to do this? It's the same thing when I walk down and it's like, there are just rainbow flags and now the trans flag and all these things. It's like, stop putting this stuff in my face everywhere.
Where are the flags? They're not on
digital space or in the public space.
But are they private businesses or they're public?
They're private businesses. But like, it's like, I'm saying, I always think of it as like, ultimately the gay people I know hate it. Like, and think it's totally pandering to constantly see that shit in their face all the time. Well, they're like, we don't want to be called out and made special. We just want to be looked at as normal. So stop. Isolate, dude. There's that funny ass screenshot that I don't know if Sweet Baby had anything to do with it. I would imagine they probably did, but from not Gotham Knights, what's the other one? Suicide Squad, where it's like all people are welcome on the huge banner.
I thought that was distracting.
It's like, oh my god! Like, why do we have to? Why are you shoving your sexuality in my face so much? It's very weird. I don't care. I don't care.
But I have to say this because I think there are two valid responses. One of them is the one that you're having, in my opinion. Not that you need my validity or my validation for response, but I do intellectually think that response makes sense. But I think it's unfair to not also acknowledge the value of the other response, which is, I'm sorry, straight white cis guy that's had pretty much 90% of media acclimated to him in terms of representation, for you to say, oh, I don't think it's important to see myself in these games. Well, that's easy for you and me to say, because we've been seeing ourselves represented in games and movies and TV shows since we were coming out the VJJ. That means vagina, Colin. The kids call it a VJJ, VJJ Abrams presents Super 8.
Dude, that would be an amazing porn production company. VJJ.
That's right. VJJ Abrams. Now I could see, come on, Jaffe, let's stay focused. The people at Last Stand Media comment section like it. Stay focused. I think if you don't also take into account the fact that there is a valid pushback, and it may have gone to such a degree that it's doing more harm than good, but I think it is cruel to act as if the people who are going, hey, there's been a lot of people in America that haven't been given the fair shake. And also what you usually hear pushback on that is, well, I'm a white guy. My life's hard too. I'm like, I know. It's like they don't take into account. It's like nobody's saying that you can't be a white, straight, cis guy and have had a shit life because you've gotten all kinds of crap thrown your way. That exists. But a lot of people, including me, are just saying that can exist, but it doesn't negate the fact that there is systemically a problem for a number of people that don't have any of your advantages. And that's what this conversation's about. It doesn't mean your list of grievances should be ignored. And maybe that's fundamentally what they feel. But then you could argue, it's like, well, you know what? The blacks and the gay folks in this country have had their grievances ignored for centuries. So take a fucking seat. I'm not saying that is the only view, because I think the view you have is valid as well. But I think until people who really want to be serious about the conversation embrace the fact that both of those are things people are feeling, and one is not a grift and one is not a lie. They can be turned into grifts, and they have been. But if you don't acknowledge both of those as valid things, then it just feels like you're only having half the conversation.
You have Akira Toriyama passing away, RIP. Mm-hmm. And I love Dragon Quest the most out of his stuff, but obviously most people love Dragon Ball the most out of his stuff.
I didn't know he worked on Blue Dragon. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway.
And just put all the images together and Chrono Trigger and all that kind of stuff, and they all look the same. And so people were I was really fascinated and loved reading about, and you probably saw this as well, how deeply connected the Black community was to and is to Dragon Ball, and how they felt about Akira Toriyama, not as a monolith, but a lot of people in that. And in Hispanic communities, there was even that thing about in Mexico City, there was a huge gathering of tons of people watching Dragon Ball in a courtyard or something like that, or some sort of plaza. And it's this is a Japanese man. And this is why I think that the Turtles thing is resonant to me, because it's this is a Japanese man creating a manga that is translated into a series of anime that get shipped over largely. My brother was a huge nerd and he was older than me, so I was watching this stuff early, but most people got it in translated form, dubbed form on Cartoon Network or Toonami or whatever. And it became this cultural phenomenon in which this is a dude from the other side of the world really making Japanese people that Hispanic people or Latino people and Black people and all people related to in a way that was not only incredibly real, but distinguished from his race, which would have tied him only to the Japanese, islands, and that's it. But it actually touched everyone. I think. I think that's a pretty powerful example of why it doesn't really matter, why even things that are cartoonish or fantastical still are bound in that racial makeup. I mean, he got in trouble for the Black characters in Dragon Ball, and he basically said, I'm pretty sure Akira Toriyama said something like, this is ours, so we're going to do what we want to do with it. And, in so many words.
But if you're saying, if it's evidence that it doesn't really matter, isn't it also evidence that it doesn't really matter on the opposite side? So if that's the case, then well, if you're basically saying that he can create these characters that resonate with a large group of Mexican folks and Black folks, then why do a lot of people who are on the side of anti-Sweet Baby and whatnot go, I don't want all these diversity in my game. It's like, well, it shouldn't matter. It didn't matter when it was Japanese characters appealing to black people and Mexicans. Why can't you vibe with a superhero team that's made up of all, trans women? What does it matter?
Yeah, it's weird. I'm so interested in the relation between characters that we imbibe with, and it's so funny because Leonardo came to mind for me when I was a kid, but also like Zach Morris, classic, Saved by the Bell, classic, handsome white guy, right?
Right.
So that's
I'm so scared, Colin.
I'm so scared of Jesse.
That is
so. It's like, but as I get old, and those are just random examples. But it's like as I get older, I think I really related to Daria. I really, when I was a young high school kid, I really, really loved Daria, and I loved that character. And so maybe I'm crazy for imbibing with these fictional characters so much, but it's like, I think
that's the whole point of fictional characters. I mean, they are. I've heard Grant Morrison say the reason superheroes are so appealing is they basically are us if we just got our shit together and stopped being assholes. That's why they're appealing. And I've also had a creative writing teacher once who said that all fiction that's good fiction are basically self-help guides. They don't present themselves as self-help guides, but they are characters that are going through things that you can relate to. And so good writing is good writing, and relatable character is relatable character. But I think the question becomes, if there is a real lack of need to see diversity in characters, just at a surface level, then I would imagine we should be hearing that complaint a lot more from the minorities that haven't been represented than the group of people like us that have been represented since the very beginning of the entertainment industry in America. Right? I mean, if you've got the vast majority of black people going, I don't need a black Spider-Man, I'm good. I don't need any black superheroes, I'm good. Then I think the market would sort of ultimately show that, although Black Panther made over $1 billion and so did Captain Marvel, the first one. But I mean, here's a great example. Micah, is she there?
She's recording Constellation. Yeah.
You should ask her. She's half black and she's a woman, right?
Yep. She's half black and she is a woman indeed. Yes.
Okay. So does she, if all her entertainment was pretty much, white women that were put as the sort of damsel in distress, like it was for so long, and all the other characters were white dudes, would she care?
Yeah,
and I'm not saying she would or wouldn't. I'm asking because we are in a very, in a lot of ways, it's ridiculous. We can talk about the fact that we may like it and support it, or we may not like it. But to sort of take up arms on the front lines of it's not important, it doesn't matter. Do we really have a seat at that table anyway?
Yeah, I guess I do know how she feels about this a little bit. I will let her speak for herself. But I mean, I generally think Micah grew up in a very homogeneously white place where she was like the black person. Right. So I think her.
You mean I'm going to stay this color?
She tells a story about how when her parents met in the Coast Guard and they got married or whatever. And they moved to this Western Massachusetts town. And this was in like the early 80s, I guess. And they local newspaper wrote a story about the black woman that moved to their town, basically. Like that was like, so it is. So she would have a unique perspective on this, but I think she's kind of been almost inoculate. Like she's, I don't know. I don't even know how to put it. It's like, she's just inherently white coded in quotes because that's all she ever, that's why it's always nature versus nurture in some sense. It's like, it's like she was just, it didn't really matter. I mean, that's why that's one of those things that really breaks down, like racial barriers for me in my own mind is just the obvious nature of just growing up in a black community, growing up in a white community, growing up in an Asian community, but being of any color can turn you out in a certain way, with your disposition or whatever the case might be. So I think that she would have a pretty.
But do you think we deserve a seat at this table? I guess I don't mean we can't talk about it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do because
our opinion is based on what when we say it's that level of diversity isn't important. We don't need that. Are we really the ones to have? Should we be taken seriously by anybody who takes this issue seriously? Because That's like kind of like saying we're super rich people and money won't buy you happiness. Trust me, I got the money. Well, yeah, you got the money. So do you really, yeah, you can have an experience that it didn't buy you happiness, but what is Kanye says, having money is not everything, but not having it is, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Having diversity, it doesn't matter to us because we got it. We have representation.
Yeah.
But maybe if you don't have any, it's a big deal.
I can see that.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, that's a completely fair point. It's the Ben Affleck quote from Boiler Room. Anyone who says money is the root of all evil never had any.
Right.
Which always stuck with me. It's completely true, just manifestly true in the world. So I always loved that quote. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that we do speak. I don't like the reductionism of saying like you're a white man and you're straight and all this, like, but it is true. And so does that mean something sociologically, like, and socially and all that? Yeah, so certainly it does. I mean, in the way we interact with each other and the way we interact with things, the benefits of the doubt that I've been given, all of the, like, that's all true. My whole thing is that it's, we talked about this recently is on Constellation. I think is like largely I look at this as out of my control and that I can only do what I can do to make it better overall by treating people the same, regardless. Yeah, but
you also have a massive platform, right? So I think, this is, I'm not saying I'm the guy. Like I talked to a friend of mine once and I was like, I'm really bothered by, people in my chat sometimes when they come on and they're mean to like minority groups. I don't let them say bad words and stuff that are hate speech, but it's just like, and she said to me, she says, it's maybe what you need to do then is because you're not the guy to really be delivering the kumbaya message on being a trans person or a black person or whatever, but maybe, offer your platform up to those voices, at least not as a, political platform, but just as a, how many trans people have you had on your show to talk about video games? How many black people have you had? And the answer is not many. And so, I don't know. I maybe that's how I could do better. In terms of when you're saying, well, what can I do? It's like, well, maybe I could do that and I should do that and I will do that because I think I don't want to turn my channel into just being about that, but I'd love to actually have a black person and a trans person on and go, talk about your experience in the industry. And do you feel that as a kid growing up loving games, did it bother you or did you give a shit that none of these characters looked like you or seemed like you? And then I think you could start to peel off the people who are engaged in this for a genuine conversation and the people that are just really uncomfortable with people who aren't like them. And that latter half is like, yeah, I have sympathy for you, but you got to go off and figure out your shit and grow up a little bit. But the first group, I'm like, yeah, let's figure it out. So.
Yeah, it's a deep point. I think it's totally fair. I mean, I think the dialogue is important. But I also look at my own group that we've built, which you're part of, and it was not done with anything in mind other than having good content creators with diverse viewpoints. And I think it is inherently racially and diverse, and to a degree, our gender diversity is much greater than our gender diversity with our listeners, which is not very diverse. It's like 95-5 or something like that.
Yeah.
So having Micah included, and I'd love to have more female voices eventually, but I've always just gone for the voices I thought were best. And
it was funny at Bartlett Jones. We never went out of our way either, but we had an insanely diverse group of people working with us at Bartlett Jones. It was like the only person we didn't have was a black person. We had trans people, gay people, conservative people, Mexican people, but we never. I don't think we ever even got a candidate that was black that was considering working with us. So. It's nice when you just hire the best, but at the same time, I think it's irresponsible to ignore the fact that doesn't go on everywhere. And
that's true.
Sometimes progress needs a little push.
Well, you and I had that conversation, Jaffe, where I told you we were talking about affirmative action, I think, which is very divisive, right? And now technically illegal, I think, in the United States. But I was like, I'm not one of those people. I don't think affirmative action should exist anymore. But I'm not one of those people that didn't think it should never have existed. I think it was fairly essential for affirmative action to exist for probably a 10 to 20 year period, beginning in the mid 60s to, let's say, mid 80s, where it's like, we really have to course correct in an active way to overcome racial prejudice, generational prejudice, whatever the case might be, as these people age out. But I think we're at a much better place now where these fixes didn't have to and don't have to be permanent. And that's kind of what I say.
What data do you have, though, to suggest, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but what data are you using to say we have crossed that bridge and it was necessary, but because these X things are occurring now, we don't need that guardrail anymore?
Yeah, I was looking. It's funny that you said that. I'm trying to find, yeah, that's fine. Oh my God. Never mind. I have to pay for this website. There were statistics released about Fortune 500 hiring. I have to find it for you from last year, where it looked like the amount of, so yeah, I think this is it. Per its report. So yeah, Yahoo Finance. I'm sorry. I'm just reading it.
No, it's fine.
However, only Thursday. Yeah, so
while Colin's reading, I'll tell you guys a vulgar joke.
Oh,
it's a vulgar joke. You don't want that on your show.
It basically says, God, there's a lot of data here. Per its report, white employees made up the majority of new hires at Fortune 500 companies, but it was only 32%, right? So black employees, 26.1%, which is twice of new hires, twice the population per capita, right? Mm-hmm. Hispanics, 20.9%, which I think is about at their line of per capita hiring. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think that there's a lot of, look at the Supreme Court, look at the makeup of of Congress, which is becoming increasingly diverse, especially in the House. The Senate is very stubbornly white male, but I think that will be, that changes more slowly. It's funny because if the Senate was still in control of the state legislatures and not the voters, it would be much more diverse now than actually it ended up being, because state legislatures are becoming more diverse.
But where's the Fortune 500 data from? Like what years?
It's from 2022. Okay. So it's a comparison, 2022 to 2023. Yes.
Okay. And I'm assuming all of those companies, maybe I'm wrong, but are at least a large percent or a majority of those companies that they're using have diversity hiring practices.
I would assume so. Yeah. It said something. I just closed the story, but it said like something like 54 of the 72 companies that they're talking about here in the specific article do have active DEI practices.
So isn't that evidence that whether or not you need to make it legal or not? I certainly don't think, at that point, the question becomes, has the number gotten to a good number, which I would agree with you that that's a pretty good percentage based on the number of white, black, and Hispanic folks in America. Has the number gotten there because, hey, we just hired the best people and they happen to be these various races? Did it get there because both a white guy and a black guy were equal, but we had a diversity hole to fill and all things were equal? Or was it the white guy was more qualified, but we had a diversity hole to fill? I think those numbers are great. But to say that because those numbers exist, which were born out of diversity programs that exist in order to make them more diverse, to suggest that is evidence that we don't need affirmative action, to me is almost the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Let's see a company that doesn't have a diverse program and see what if their numbers are the same, then I would agree with you. But do we have that data?
Yeah, I didn't see that in the story. We might have that data.
I'm sure we do.
The labor, the Bureau of Labor. And I, as a business owner, I submit all sorts of fucking annoying numbers all the time to them. So, so they should hopefully have data on all that stuff. But yeah, it's true that it's clearly working. If you think that twice the per capita representation is what is working, in terms of black people, for instance, at Fortune 500 companies, that could be fine, because you could say that like there's a negative of 50%. And so you have to actually have 200% hiring to get to that 100% threshold or whatever. It's like whatever the case might be. I think the greatest irony, and you and I have reflected on this in the past, Jaffe, is that I think it's a shame that the least bigoted, least racist, least whatever generations of people are the ones that are being kind of cast upon as the ones that have to change their society actively, when really the change will come from within, because they aren't racist and they aren't bigoted and they don't care if you're gay and they don't care if you're trans and they don't care if you're black. It's like, this is the majority, vast majority of young people. And so to me, it's just it would just be a natural turnover. It's almost like punitive towards it's the wrong generations to even be punitive against in some way. So to me, I just look at it and say, like, the ideal would be for higher, like, whatever.
What's the punitive part?
Well, what I was going to say was, if it's like, well, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, that I think that for certain people, so if there's an overrepresentation in, for instance, in Fortune 500 companies of black people, then there must be an underrepresentation of someone else.
Yeah,
isn't justice just having it being like, when you shake it all up, right? And you shake up all the Fortune 500 companies in a perfect world, it should shake out to just represent the per capita racial representation of the United States around there. That would be the ideal, wouldn't it? Anything more or less than that is.
It would be the ideal, and I think that's a valid place to use as your ground base. I think you could make an argument, if you wanted to, that says the way the diversity of America in terms of the percentage of people who are this, that, or the other is very much built on a reflection of there's an aspect to the way we treat minorities in America that has made that diversity percentage what it is. But I don't have data for that. I'm just saying that you could argue that there are racists in America in certain parts of the country, and because of that, they're still thinking, even though they may not write an article about it, is we just had our first black woman move into the state or move into the city, right? That will determine who a person marries, the color of the skin of their kids, blah, blah, blah. But whatever, I'm just bringing that up as like, hey, if you really wanted to dive deep, I would want to know that. But your point, though, of should the companies represent the diverse nature of the city in which they operate? I guess, but I think the question then becomes, who are you? So you're basically saying, if you have a company in downtown Chicago, that company hires should reflect the percentage of downtown Chicago of blacks, Hispanics, and white people.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, right? I mean, that would be...
Ideally is what... Yeah, because that's...
Like okay. Or at least when you shake everything up, so like you shake a workforce up in an industry, say, it should just look like the certain demographic expectations that you would have if everything was equal, right? And if it's off from that, it could be discriminatory one way or the other. Like Asian people are the ones that are really suffering from a lot of this stuff, unfortunately, in academia, and they're the ones, behind a lot of the lawsuit stuff. But so I'm not saying it's like against white people or whatever, and I don't really give a shit. It's just like it to me. It seems obvious that if you let like let's ignore millennials and let's just go to like Gen Z. You just let them go. And I think a lot of this would just be.
I think the 60s would disagree with you, because the kids in the 60s that became the boomers were going to, Bob Dylan's generation and Woodstock's generation and, Timothy Leary and Dropout or whatever, the Peace, Love, Dope generation. They became the Bill Clintons, they became the George Bushes.
Sure.
And so maybe that's just doesn't work that way, but I would love to see it. Maybe it does. Cause I agree with you that this younger generation seems much, much more tolerant, not entirely, but better than it's ever been in America. I would absolutely agree with that. So maybe, but let me ask you this. How do you square this? So if you're in a Fortune 500 company, that means you're doing pretty good, correct?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah. So
doesn't the fact that a Fortune 500 company or the majority of the Fortune 500 companies have a diverse makeup that's potentially even tipped beyond what the norm is in the city in which they operate are able to be Fortune 500 companies? Doesn't that actually prove that the free market is saying, we'll spend more money, we'll spend enough money on your decisions because your products are good enough that you have been put into the Fortune 500 company? I mean, doesn't that prove that it's like, well, they're making money. This is working. The free market is saying even though they may not consciously be aware of what the makeup is, the end result is a product that puts them into a rarefied position of being in that list. Right. So, I mean, if you were to see evidence that having a 20% increase of black people on staff that, is 20% more than what the per capita is where the city is located or the company's located in that city, those companies tend to do 40% better would you go, I know that sucks, but fuck it, that's the free market speaking? Or how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I guess that would be fascinating. I mean, I just, like many racial statistics, though, they get dangerous when you start messing around with what the races are and how people would perceive.
Yeah, but I don't care about that. I'm tired of that bullshit. Maybe it's because I'm a gamer and I play RPGs just like everybody else who probably watches this show. But you know what? Look, I was raised Jewish. I'm half Jewish ethnically, I guess, because my dad's from that region, Lithuania, Eastern European. We didn't have any money. So I'm not going to get upset when people say the Jews are really good with money. Yeah, seems like they are. I wish we had been better. Doesn't mean everybody.
Right.
Doesn't mean all Italians are sitting around going, hey, but you know, like you've said, a lot of Italians have, and a lot of Jews have a lot of ethnicity characteristics when it comes to how they debate and talk. And, you know, there's a cultural aspect to it that leads to a certain way of performing in a specific environment. And I'm sorry, but, you know, is it really awful to say some of these things out loud that I think everybody knows? Do I think black people are better at dancing? Yeah, they are. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean every black person is a great dancer. Doesn't mean every white person's a shit dancer. But, you know, I think if you were to do a fucking survey and have a judgment of what most people think of as good dancing, you'd probably find black people do it better than white people. I don't know why it is. And that doesn't mean you want to give or deny opportunities outside of just free market opportunities, like who you're going to hire to play at your party as an entertainer. But it seems weird we can't even talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, you got a lot of
agree.
shit for talking about Asian people being better at business or something. And I was like, I don't know if Colin had the data, but if he had the data, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean,
the culture that they come from is much more, you know, American. And, you know, most kids in America, you think kids are reading like they used to as a news story in America? Because, oh my God, kids are finally reading Harry Potter. It's like, Jesus, that's a news story. They decided to fucking pick up a book. But education is much more valued in certainly a country like China.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't we have? I mean, I'm not saying it like I'm trying to convince you. I'm asking you, why can't we have those conversations? Aren't they relevant?
Yeah, they are relevant. I think people, it's just all about, to me, egalitarianism, because I think that if people garner certain genetic realities about whatever group and they start gleaming this on outcomes and the way people are treated and stuff like that, I think people get scared about the outcomes of those things. And like, it's like, I just think we should just treat everyone the same, regardless.
Oh, that's different. Everybody should be treated the same, but that doesn't mean we can't acknowledge.
No, I know, but I'm saying having that rooted principle allows you to explore these questions because the outcome doesn't really matter, you know, like, because
it's not like I'm going to treat somebody shitty because they're not good at math. I mean, that would be,
well,
you know what I'm saying?
No, totally. It also gets into why, like, I think you're talking about obvious truths, right? I think it's really interesting to think about that in terms of
obvious truths at a large en masse. I'm not saying every individual type of person. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the makeup of professional sports teams, the racial makeup of them, for one specific reason, which is you can tell that it's not one thing, but like a multitude of things that drive people towards certain sports, playing them, and that the outcomes would be exactly the same if only access was different. So for instance, hockey, my favorite sport, is very white, right? But it's very white because it's white people tend to have a lot more money economically,
same with
and
golf,
they
right?
have better access, and nicer towns have arenas where you can go play hockey. And it's like this massive trickle down that precludes many black people from playing the game. It doesn't mean that white people are better than black people at hockey. It just means that they have better access to it and that it's easier to play. This is why I think soccer is such a global game, because it requires nothing but a ball and some sort of space to play, as opposed to hockey, where I had to spend thousands of dollars to be a goalie.
Okay, but then how do you explain basketball? Because basketball, yes, you have inner city basketball and it's accessible, but you also have basketball in affluent areas as well.
Well, that's the point I'm making, is that it's all fed. These are all fed into by a multitude of things that make them what they are. And basketball, to me, from my perspective, basketball, and I'm not a huge NBA fan, but it seems to have become even blacker as we've gone into the forward, as opposed to.
I'm looking that up.
I'd be interested to know. I think it's something like 80, or maybe that might even be the NFL. But there are probably a number of reasons why people are driven to the sport, and also why they take it seriously as a professional pursuit based on their opportunities in their environments. Right. You know what I mean? So it's not like this racial makeup that makes a black person better than a white person, or a white person better than a black person.
70% of NBA players last year were African American.
Black, yeah, that seems actually lower than I would have thought it was. A lot of the best players seem to be black. Let's say that.
Take medicine.
Do you understand, audience? It's Alexa.
Oh, they think it's
they think it's some
Camgirl website.
Camgirl thing. Alexa, stop. I like the fact that even if I use Camgirls, I've only used a Camgirl once. Well, twice. Once I used for a bit. I had her talk to Phil Spencer. But another one, and I thought that video would be huge. It's like whenever I do sex stuff, like funny sex stuff, people are like, I don't like it. But, and then the other time was I was trying out virtual reality. And I was like, I got to try out virtual reality porn. People say it's amazing, and it is amazing. But when you open up any porn window these days, it opens up a live Camgirl sub window. Like, hey, come to this thing. And I'm like, they have VR Camgirls? What is that about? So I clicked on it, and it was weird, but cool, but weird, but cool. I mean, because she's right there. It's like she's right there. And she didn't see me because I didn't have my camera on, and she was talking to a whole room of dudes, I assume, but or whoever. But it was just so weird to have that sense of intimacy with someone that if you wanted, you could go into a private VR chat with this woman and it would be like she's right with you. It's crazy. But no, that's my little friend from Amazon. There's nothing. Because imagine, like you said, I think at one point you said, how bold would that be?
Yeah,
that he's doing a show and he's also like talking to some cam girl. Like, oh yeah, I agree, Colin. That game was crazy. I want you to take my cock, see, and make it into a pretzel. What? So yeah,
it would have been so bold.
I know. I got to do it now just to do it.
But back to the point I was making was just to wrap it up was, and we can get on another topic if we want or continue this. I have no problem at all. But is like, I think like when you look at the racial makeups of the professional sports as an example, it doesn't suggest any one thing. It suggests like a number of different things, and that to me,
it does. But don't you also think the fact that, so you're suggesting that if, okay, but that's wrong because because basketball would prove you wrong, because your hockey analogy or your hockey example makes a lot more sense. But at the same time though, basketball, no, I see what because on one hand you could say, well, basketball's everywhere. It's not just in places that are lower socio incomes or just places where a lot more black people happen to be. It's everywhere. But you could also argue, like you said, the opportunity in those lower socioeconomic areas, it's more of a valid brass ring to reach for. Whereas if you are in a rich high school, you may not really push yourself to excel in basketball because you're like, there's 30 things I could do. I don't just have to, that's not the only ticket out or one of the 2 tickets out I can see. So I do agree there are those factors, but do you think those factors trump the biological factors that we associate like with black athletes? I'm of the mind, and I don't follow this a lot, but I'm of the mind that when it comes to basketball, there is a biological reason or a physiological reason that black athletes excel more than white athletes in that sport. Do you think that's an ignorant statement, or do you think there's some real validity there that have nothing to do
I don't
with
think I don't think that's an ignorant statement. Micah and I have had this conversation and it's like, I'm like, I don't know, like, because it's not meant as an offensive thing, but is there like a physical talent inborn in certain African-American groups that was basically from like generations past where they were breeding for that very specific strength and agility and all that kind of stuff.
But yeah, I mean, it was,
And so that, generations later, obviously that's still going to be true. And I'm like, I don't mean it as a racist thing at all. It's like, is that the reason? Like, why is there such a physical gift? Like, why are white people so frumpy by comparison?
Right.
And all of this. So I think it is a reasonable question to ask. I just don't know like what the science says at all. I really don't.
I don't either. And I think, shame on anybody coming at me in the comments about this. And it's like, yes, that is a question to ask. That is I understand it is surrounded with cultural landmines, but I'm sorry if being curious, I'm not insulting anybody. I'm not saying if you're black, you need to go play a sport. I'm not saying if you're Jewish, you better fucking be good with money. I'm saying that as an observer that does not have all the data, there are these things that appear connected. And my mind is open enough to be educated by someone maybe in the comments to go, oh no, it's not connected. It seems connected and it makes sense why you would think it's connected, but here's what's really happening. But, shame on people for not even allowing people to discuss it. Fuck you is what I would say, because I'm not racist. I'm not against people that are different or the same as me, but I certainly am curious, and go fuck yourself if I'm not allowed to ask questions. I hate that shit.
No, I agree with you. I mean, because it is just an observation. I was trying to find something about it. Didn't really know exactly what to Google. I found an article from The Guardian. It says, and this is from 2021, ironically, but it's timely right now. It says, as March Madness rolls on, so will the myths of black athletics superiority. Apparently, there was this book by a guy named John Entine in 2000. Oh, okay. He wrote a book called Taboo: Why Black Athletes Dominate Sports and Why We're Afraid to Talk About It.
Oh,
and over more than it says here in the article, quote, over more than 300 pages, Entine defended the same idea that my classmates and I had devised. Black people simply possess an inherent physical advantage for athletic competition.
Okay.
But this person's arguing in their article, and I haven't read it because I just pulled it up, but it's long, that's like a misguided idea.
Yeah, I'd love. Where's that article you're?
Oh, here, I'll send it to you in the chat.
Yeah, I want to read it after this.
It's here. So yeah, I think I wonder about that too. Like I wonder. Well, I just wonder about all sorts of things. It seems like everything's genetic, like everything about us in some way. And I know this is something you deeply believe as well. But just like everything, we know that many things are inherited from your parents. So theoretically, that would be true through down the line for long periods of time.
But again, it is true.
This reminds me a lot of the conversation that used to go around. You know that old book? What is it called? The Bell Jar or whatever, something like that.
I never read it. There's something in the Bell Jar I'm thinking of the diving and the butterfly, but the Bell Jar, I know what you're talking about.
I think that's what it's called. No, this is not what I'm it's something else. It's something. Oh, that's a Sylvia Plath fucking book. So it was some book that came out in the early 90s that suggested in one of its chapters that that IQ and intelligence was inheritable by or like distinguishable by race. Do you know what I'm talking about? And
I'm not surprised by somebody writing that, but I don't.
Yeah, it's the bell. It's the bell curve. That's what it's called.
The bell curve. Okay.
The bell curve. Yeah. Okay. It's a book called The Bell Curve, 1994 book, very controversial.
Yep.
By Charles Murray and Richard J. Herrnstein, quote, in which the authors argue that human intelligence is substantially influenced by both inherited and environmental factors, and that it is a better predictor of many personal outcomes, including financial income, job performance, birth out of wedlock, and involvement in crime than our individual's parents' socioeconomic status, end quote. So they're arguing a nature over nurture, I guess, approach. And it's a very scholarly book. It's almost 1,000 pages long. I've never read it. But I know that there was a major controversy around this because they presented this data that was very controversial about IQ, but I don't think it was specifically said, or maybe it didn't need to be said, but I think this is the problem that people have, which is like, it doesn't matter what it says, right? And I think that that's something that's really important for us to say. It's like, okay, so assume. And I think in what I've read about it is like Indians and like Indian subcontinent Indians and Asians are at the top or whatever of that. And it's like, okay, does that mean that you're better than me? Because as long as it doesn't mean that you're better than me, I think we're okay on that. If it means that like you're going to fucking if it means you're going to use like whatever your tools are to subjugate me, and that's different, I guess. But I just want to treat people the same. And it also doesn't mean that you can't be whatever you are on the spectrum. I don't know whether it's true or not. I just know that caused a lot of controversy for that very specific reason, as far as I understand, which is,
there's, I think the danger is, or people worry about, understandably so, being given some kind of ticket to start going backwards to like Leo DiCaprio when he was cracking open that guy's skull at the table in Django Unchained and going, this is a black man's skull and he has this ridge here. And because of that, it means they're not as smart as we are. That's the stuff that I think you have to be really careful of because you can weaponize it for racist assholes. But I think, and I think if you have, there are plenty of black people who definitely suck at sports. And to not acknowledge that, I think is not equality and is cruelty. But to not acknowledge also sort of certain things that may, and again, I think the jury might be out, or maybe it's just out for me, may also be true that you can kind of make a blanket statement about. I think that's also just living in ignorance.
I appreciate that you have that. There's a level of bravery there, I think, in modernity to say, like, let's just ask.
Stupid.
But I agree with you, generally speaking. I just feel like it doesn't truly matter.
Oh, I mean, it matters as an intellectual exercise,
right.
But if you're going to start applying it to choices and not giving people opportunities, then yeah, that's totally different. I mean, that's bullshit.
But wrapping it back to I'm glad that we agree that it seems unfair how punitive everything appears to be to a group or a series of generations that, in my opinion, definitely don't give a shit if you're gay. I mean, I don't know that there's really very much of that at all anymore. Like,
but why is that? One could argue that's because they grew up seeing it on TV. They grew up with their music.
I think, I don't know what I think. I think that's all true, but I think a major thing was that a lot of people now have grown up with out of the closet gay people that did feel comfortable being gay for the first time. And so they knew someone that was gay.
But why did they feel comfortable coming out of the closet?
Yeah, maybe it is because of this goes back into the way that affirmative action should have existed for a while.
Right.
This is the same thing. It's like, maybe we should have had an overtly, like, here's the rainbow flag in your face, and here's, but like at some point you just kind of,
I agree, but I don't think we're the guys to determine when that time is.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what I was saying was that I feel like the newer generations definitely, from my perspective, the gay thing doesn't matter to them at all. The racial thing doesn't really seem to matter to them at all, which I think is great too. I think the most divisive social topic might be the trans issue with some people still, but I obviously think that is also overtly going in one direction, regardless of how you feel about it. So it just seems like naturalistically we'll get to a more diverse place that will produce inherently diverse products for an inherently diverse audience. But I also reject, back to the Ninja Turtles argument, like I also reject this idea that you have to relate, like in the role-playing game that we're writing, like the main characters are a white woman and a black man. Sorry.
Woke.
Like I hope you guys think we did okay with them. It's being written by two white men, me and Jono, and we're going to do the best we can with it, but I think you're going to relate to these characters, and I don't think you're going to care that much about it, and I hope you do relate to them.
That's how it's supposed to work, right? I mean, you've got a view on religion or capitalism or politics, and this is what I'm saying. It's like no one's stopping you from expressing yourself.
Totally. No.
And if there's a person out there that really feels that they, as a white straight male, are not getting their fair share of representation, I get that not most people want to make creative products, but enough people do that support those people that are making that stuff because it is out there.
Yeah, totally.
And they're like, yeah, but it's not AAA. It's like, well, what?
No, that should always bother.
Your AAA is going away anyway. The frequency of those drops is going to get less and less.
It's funny.
Anyway,
it's funny you say that because I'm playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth now. I just started it a couple of nights ago, and it's fun and it's really interesting, and I like it a lot. I loved Final Fantasy Remake, but I'm like, man, this game looks like a PS4 game. I wonder if we're going to have to like get into more of like straight up looks like a PS4 game. There's nothing about it that looks like a PS5 game. And I'm like, that's okay with me. As long as the game's good, I'm happy at this 1080p 60 frames, relatively nice looking. Everything will get better increasingly, but nonetheless, I feel like even not that these games really mean anything to anyone. I know they don't, but Hebroxia and Hebroxia 2, well, Hebroxia 2 is about Sabrina, who is a woman, and I wrote her. And Twinbreaker and Hebroxia 2 are deeply political, like overtly political games. People might not like the writing or think it's ham-fisted or stupid or whatever, but they are overtly political. And so,
has anyone complained?
No, not really. I mean, but because it's not about like partisan politics, but it's just about, it's political. It's about World War III and like people can go play them, but that's the whole point I was making earlier, Jaffe, that I'm glad I was able to reiterate, is that if I ever take umbrage with any of the things these people are doing, and by the way, it's getting so complicated now where I feel like I'm weeks behind on like the information. Someone's getting sued by some group, I think. And like, I don't know what the hell is going on, but so I have to read into all of this, but that's what I was saying earlier about, I want to be able to do what I want to do. And I want you to be able to do what you want to do. And that's totally cool with me, but we need to have like a level of, we need to have like agreed upon facts and approaches and all of these kinds of things.
Yeah, but there's no narrative to suggest that people aren't able to do what they want to do. The reason that gets thrown around sometimes is, again, I think, the media is partially responsible for selling this bullshit kumbaya of what it's like to make creative product or behind the scenes on a movie or in a game team. But most people don't get to show up to work at a creative product that's being funded by someone else and do exactly what they want to do anyway. There's always oversight. There's always a director of a director of a director of a director. There's always somebody who can kind of put their thumb on the scale and say, not today, you're not doing that. And the idea that somehow is only occurring now, it's like that's always been going. But anytime anybody was a patron and said, you're doing a painting for me, I'm this, and it's like, well, I want to paint tacos, says the artist, and the patron's like, I don't care, paint my wife, she's beautiful. I don't think your wife's beautiful, but I'll paint her beautiful because you're paying me, right? I mean, that's where did these people get the idea that this stuff is created by, you go into sort of creative space and no one can bother you and you come out with this perfect product? I mean, that's not what it is.
Yeah, it's only something, it's true that there's like this really ironic tension between the patrons, like you said, and the richest of the rich, and then the most talented people, where they wouldn't have been able to do what they like. This thing wouldn't have existed without both of them, which is capitalism and an encapsulation of capitalism, where only the masters were able to do like, whatever they wanted. And even then, like Mona Lisa was someone we don't really, I think it's just lost about who she is or whatever, but it wasn't just painted for shits,
Yeah. Right. Right.
So I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
And it goes into what it goes into all of these conversations, which is like, it's more complicated than everything's more complicated than people give the things credit for. I think it's like, there's more to say, there's more nuance, there's more gray area. There's no easy answers. And you really are one of the people that I can talk to about this kind of stuff, where it's, about anything really, where you have a nuanced view. I think that's why people are so attracted to you, and to your content.
Well, I will tell you, one of the things that I'm starting to noodle with is a sad thought about all this stuff, which is, the ability to even have these thoughts and discussions is really an arrogant place of privilege. And I don't mean financial privilege or anything, but how do I put this? Like I said, I'm just beginning to think through this, but we are so close to a couple of bad decisions made by us or someone else away from just devolving into our lizard brain self. Like, it is so thin that the debate and analysis and discussion is a luxury, because, and I think that is what sometimes you see with some of these Trump supporters, is that I do, even though I don't agree with them on almost anything, I do understand aspects of their feeling ignored by the powers that be, because there's a sense of, it's like, all that intellectual masturbation is great, but I can't afford food. Like, I have a guy who's on my chat who is super fucking far right, and he's struggling with money right now, and I hope that that's not permanent for him. But there is no doubt that when that's your life, and those are your struggles, all of the pontification and analysis. And what about this? And maybe it's this and it's nuanced. All that's like, I get it. I don't care though. My kid is hungry, man. And that trumps everything. And it should, but it sucks that we've built a society where that is a frequent enough experience for people that we have now been able to commoditize it for grifters and politicians, and that it's actually good business to keep people feeling that way. I mean, it's dark. I don't like it, but welcome to fucking existence, I suppose. And I know at 52, people are like, yeah, Jaffe, I figured that out when I was 12. I know, but I'm a slow learner. Fuck you, is what I would say. So anyway, games, man. But games are great. And it does make me appreciate games more because they are a delightful escape. I mean, I never looked at them that way. I know when I was like procrastinating, I'd go to the 7-Eleven and play Mortal Kombat. That was an escape. But as I've gotten older, you ever see this video that went viral on YouTube? It was really, people made fun of it a lot, and there's stuff to make fun of there, which is, I think it opens with this guy. It's all footage of games, and he's like, I am a gamer, and when I game, I don't need people tell me I should go out into the real world, but I've saved Princess Zelda multiple times, and I've done this, and and everybody was mocking the guy and saying touch grass and all that, and as they should have to some extent. It was a very unhealthy take. But I the older I get, the more I do kind of have great empathy for the people who, not everybody's equipped to go on the big stage all the time. Not everybody has, as people say, leading character energy in their lives. And everybody at some point certainly doesn't have it. There are times where I just want to escape. And it makes me so grateful to have something like Dragon's Dogma, that's a terrible title. I can't even say it. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. It's got that awkward multiple plural or multiple possessive thing.
Yes. But I will say, as I get older, the more I love that about games. And I really just think it's such a gift. I think you can go way too far with it, like anything, and that's not good. But I think that's really cool. I don't know why that came up, but I guess because we're talking about such dark stuff that it is nice. And I get the people who go, I played Suicide Squad and I don't want that stuff because I just want to escape. It's like, yeah, well, I get it, but sorry. There's other things you can use to escape. But I do love that part about games. And I guess that's all I want to say about that. And
I also could respect that, like, someone would want to escape into a world where they feel like the beauty of games is that you can escape in all sorts of myriad worlds that are kind of catered to you. We were talking recently on Sacred. I love the idea of, people were saying, like, is playing a game's a waste of time? And I'm like, it is a waste of time. It's like it's the classic pastime.
Everything's a waste of time.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And that's what I was saying to people. I'm like, it's what a great way to kind of spend time. And I also think get great storytelling, fun experiences. I've been trying to articulate better over time. Like, I don't always play games for fun, and I don't know how exactly to explain it, but I play them for other reasons too. And I just think it's such a dynamic and interesting space. Well,
I think what's interesting too is when people say, oh, well, you should live in the real world. It's like, okay, that's cool. And there's truth there. But I also would push back and say, most people who live in the real world, and that's really, they're healthy and all this, what are they really doing? They're working towards getting into a position where their life can be exactly what they want it to be. It's like everybody's chasing the ability to feel special and good and safe. That I can have. I'm not saying that the feeling safe and good in a video game is better than feeling that way in real life, but don't act like there's something more noble. You're just working harder so you can make money, so you can retire or go on vacation 2 weeks a year and not have to report to the man. I mean, everybody's chasing the same feeling. So don't kind of shame somebody for it just because they're doing a little bit of something that's not as powerful necessarily as having it in the quote real world. But I don't know. There's something about games and escapism and what they provide. There's a book back there somewhere called Reality's Broken. I'm sure you've heard of it, by Jane McGonigal. And that was her whole theory. It was about 10 years old. And about the gamification of a lot of things, right. and how a lot of the younger generation at the time are escaping into these games because, you know, the economy sucks, their job sucks, there's not a lot of upward mobility. Who could blame them? You know, and I'm not saying that the end of the day, the goal is not to engage with reality, but I don't know. I think there's some nobility about what these games provide people. I would say you saw Ready Player One, right?
No, I didn't. I don't
At
see
the
anything.
end of the game, in the movie, the guy wins everything and he gets control of the virtual environment. It's not a spoiler. It's been out forever. And he's like, you know, we know people love the Oasis, which is what the VR environment was, but we made it so it's turned off on Tuesday and Thursday because, you know, you got to get into reality too. And it's like, bitch, you just won the whole fucking thing. You're a trillionaire. Yeah, your reality is great, but the people outside are still living in the stacks, you know, and living a shit life. Go fuck yourself. It's like the minute you get a little money and privilege and power, you want to start judging other people that don't have what you have and go, this is how you should live your life. That was the one false note I think of that story, is like his lesson was the real world's good. That lesson would have worked if you wouldn't have won the contest, but you won the contest. Of course, the real world's good for you. Anyway, good Lord. Have I been talking? Colin, what do you want to talk about?
No, it's all good. I'm quite satiated. I mean,
Colin's like, fuck you, motherfucker. I can edit all this shit.
No,
out.
I'm not. We're not. I don't think we're going to edit anything.
No, I know. I'm kidding.
I found this a very fruitful and interesting conversation. I just like talking to you about all these various things. I feel like the industry is in a period of flux in some way because we have these serious layoffs and a lot of people purging out, I think, permanently, because I just don't think there's going to be a place for them. We have a rule now on sacred symbols where, unless it's a big deal, like Mikami just, you know, he has a new team. It's like, unless it's a really big deal that someone's making into a team, we're not even going to talk about it until they announce their game. Because a lot of these guys are getting their games canceled and their money pulled, their funding pulled. You know, this guy from BioWare and this guy from Bethesda and this guy from Arcane and it's like all these different things. They're all just kind of folding. It's a bad scene out there. And yet it's juxtaposed against what I would consider to be a somewhat golden era of video games. Not only because of what's coming out contemporaneous to us, but because we have access to so much of what has already come out and more access to those old games than ever, just from ports and from PC and even people emulating and all these different things. It just seems like games are in such a great space, but the money's being spent in very peculiar ways and people don't know how to adjust to it.
I mean, you're not a PC guy, right?
No, I just don't like playing games on PC. No.
Because you're not on a couch, or what's the reason? Yeah,
I really think it's a matter of, we talked about nature versus nurture before. I grew up on consoles, you know, like I just wasn't playing video games on PC by the time I started even messing around with PC games. I was already in middle school and high school. And so I love controller gaming. I just think it's a permanent part of my life for as long as possible. I know you can play a controller on this too, but yeah, it's just the relaxed nature of it, you know.
But I mean, you can play like Steam big screen, right? So, you know, you can put your games
I understand all of that, but I also, I actually have a pretty good computer too that Dustin built me, so I could play games. I only ask
because it seems like such a shame for somebody who is serious about the medium and serious about being curious about it and what's out there, that you don't expose yourself. And I don't mean like, oh, the graphics. I'm not one of those guys. I don't like technology. I love technology, but I don't like being responsible for it. I can't get the sound working half the time. So, but I mean the democratization of distribution that PC allows, whether you're talking Steam or itch.io or just like Red Candle Games that can't get their game Devotion, which is one of the best horror games ever made, anywhere except on their own website. It seems like you would really enjoy the ecosystem of what you can experience on PC that you're never going to get to have on console. Not because, oh, these games are so fucking awesome, but because that's kind of where more of the art is happening, because you have less people, less cooks in the kitchen, basically.
Yeah. I think I embrace you're right. I mean, though in my own experience, I've said this so many times to the audience that like my least favorite generation was the one where I tried to play on everything, which was Xbox, GameCube, PS2, because that was when I was in high school and into college, and I had money and I could buy, I had a job and I could buy whatever I wanted, and I just bought so many fucking games. And I feel like I never really GameCube, I was pretty far up its ass. I think I got my GameCube experience, but Xbox and PS2, I feel like I kind of sacrificed half the time I could have been spending with one with the other, and kind of got a vague sense of a lot of things, but never a deep sense of it. And I think that that's fine from a consumer level, but I think because a lot of my audience says this to me too. And I'm like, I think you should be careful what you ask for, because I think you kind of come to me for a specific reason. And if I get distracted from that reason, from like my usual way of doing things, then my expertise is going to fall a great way. I'm going to have much less to say. I won't be able to do like.
Yeah, but that's kind of like saying
really
Roger Ebert has only been good.
What I was going to say was like, I didn't make a trivial living being a PlayStation podcaster. Like, I did a really nice job for myself being a PlayStation podcaster. So you have to understand that I've completely embraced that, like, sure. and that Helldivers is a great example where that's an example, and it was on PlayStation, which is good, and that's where I played it. But it's like, that's an example of what happens when I get distracted by something. I missed a ton of shit that came out. I am so far behind now because of it. And now imagine introducing these other platforms to my life. I've just embraced that I would rather know one thing very well than have a vague sense of understanding in all these other things. We were actually talking about this on Sacred, where Chris was bringing up how it's kind of a shame that we don't play Minecraft or we don't play whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but that in and of itself is like, that's an opportunity cost. If you become like a Stardew Valley master, then you're not playing a bunch of other things. And I just think we have to kind of, more than ever, if we want to be creators with good content, I prefer to choose my lane, and just stay in this space. So that's,
I don't disagree with that, but I would suggest that this, and obviously, because you've had great success with it, but I don't know if the lanes are being divvied up in the same way in the future. I think what I was going to say is, it's kind of like saying Roger Ebert was a wonderful writer about movies, but he would only watch, noir movies from the 1920s or detective movies or dramas that came from Universal Studios.
Yeah, Paramount. Yeah, like
right. It's like, if I get that you would say, I want to be the RPG guy, or I want to be the retro platform guy, and I want to dive so deep into that people come here knowing, but I wonder, given how little these console companies are able to release content anymore, that the value of being the PlayStation guy, what is that going to mean next generation? How many games are we really going to get from them?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Versus like, you're the guy who turned me on to, was it Bat Boy or Owl
Bat
Boy?
Yeah, Bat Boy.
Yeah, I haven't played it, but I bought it because of that, because I know you like the Mega Mans and the retro stuff. And I'm like, I'm sure this will be a good time. I think you're absolutely right about specializing, but I wonder, let me ask you then, point blank, do you think specializing in a specific console, given Xbox is probably getting out of that world? I mean, they say they're not, who the fuck knows? Do you think that's where the specialty skills lie in the next 5 years or 3 years or 2 years?
Probably not. I mean, if I were a new content creator, I would either be a generalist, which I think would be a bad idea because I don't know how you're going to get any traction that way, or I would choose my vertical from a different perspective, which would probably be
specific
genres. I think would probably be the safest way, or even like publishers or developers. Like if you do this, if you do it part-time, for instance, as like a passion project, but you're really good at it and you fucking love Vanillaware, and you can give like each of those releases that they release every few years, like a lot of love, and you otherwise work XYZ at a desk job and you don't care. I think that's a pretty cool way to go forward, but yeah, genres would probably be the best way. Or like, it's too late for me to change now, and I don't want to change. I think it's just
not your business. I just mean, I wasn't bringing it up for Sacred Symbols. I was bringing it up for you as someone who loves the medium. There's just a lot of shit out there at the buffet you ain't tried yet.
I think it's inevitable that I end up on PC at some point. Like I've kind of fully accepted that's because I think ultimately there'll be a PlayStation.
You and Jim and I have arrived at the same place.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think there'll be a PlayStation launcher. There'll be like all of these things that will draw people in, and then before you know it, there'll be all sorts of interconnectivity. And then I think the platformless reality, I think is we anticipated it way too early, way too many times, but it ultimately will be there. And so I think that it reminds me, it's funny, Jaffe, because at IGN, we were split into console teams, as you might remember, right?
Sure.
And then we weren't for a while. And people wanted to fold it over. And I remember being, and so each of us one of us was in charge I was in charge of IGN PlayStation, but we had to do a bunch of other things. And that ended up being a huge mistake because people anticipated the end of tribal consolism, let's say, way too early. And really, the reason that IGN was so successful was because we had people that were just obsessive about those specific platforms, whether it was Matt Casamassina with Nintendo and Fran Mirabella with Nintendo, or whether it was Greg and me with PlayStation, or whether it was, Ryan McCaffrey or Hillary Goldstein with Xbox. I think that was a great benefit, and they were wrong about splitting those teams up, and they put us back together. And I think that, like, seeing the fall of it, I think it's closer than it's ever been. But I think we get one more PlayStation console. Then from there, I don't know how. It's hard for me to believe that in 2038, let's say, when we get a PlayStation 7 possibility, that it's not going to be like a completely unthinkable piece of cloud technology or something like that. It's hard for me to believe that as much as I would love to believe that we're going to be buying consoles until I'm 100, I just don't know that that's going to be the case.
Well, I can tell you, and again, I'm not here to proselytize streaming, but what I will tell you is all it takes is for you to get into a situation where it is like my situation, where the network is good and you're close enough to a server farm and you don't go back. Any game that I play now, my first stop is it on GeForce? I got Dragon's Dogma on that. I got Banished on that. I'm going to replay Cyberpunk. I'm going to buy it again so I can get it on PC because I have it on PS5 right now. It is so seamless and easy, and I don't even know after 5 seconds, like when I don't say it, when I get over the excitement of like, this is so crazy, I stop thinking about playing it on stream. I'm just playing, and it's so delightfully easy and frictionless, and and people can rail against it all they want if they've had a bad experience or if they really like physical and all that, and that's all great. But what I'm saying is the minute you have the experience as it's designed to be given, and everybody ultimately will, most people won't want to go back. The convenience is just, and the frictionlessness is just too delightful compared to what we've had to do in the past. But I get it. I mean, you gotta see it to believe it. And I understand that.
What do you make of, you had brought up earlier what's going on with Xbox and seeming maybe disincentivizing console sales and all of the rest, and kind of disengaging from that world in some way. What do you think's going on with them? It seems like Phil Spencer's talking a lot. And
I was very, I'll tell you in a second, because I did want to ask you if you knew, because it'll kind of feed into my answer, because I need to know this first. But he was saying the other day, and I think he was just kind of talking and thinking like it would be great to get Epic and Steam on Xbox, right? Is what he was saying. And I was a little confused by that, because did he mean that it was going to be cloud streaming? So if you could cloud stream to your Xbox, your Steam library, because otherwise it would just because you have Steam, the games still have to run natively on the Xbox hardware, right? So you'd have to, do you know if he was talking about streaming or talking about just you would have the access to the Steam store, and the only things that would run on your Xbox though would be games that could run on Xbox natively, not just because you had it on PC.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this, that I thought I could be wrong, but that conversation also ended up being like years old.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, no, I could be wrong on that, but
okay.
Yeah, but I don't really know. To me, that confused me, just because it's like, okay, so you don't want people, they obviously want people to buy their hardware, but the hardware is not important, but you're going to have third-party kind of Google Android style sideloading of other storefronts on your hardware, disincentivizing people from spending money in your ecosystem. Like, will there be another split where Microsoft gets a piece of the money?
Yeah, there would have to. I'm sure there would be. Yeah.
And if that's the case, why would Steam do that?
Yeah. So I guess if it's old, okay. I mean, I look, I love my Xbox. I've enjoyed the Xbox ecosystem more than the PlayStation 5 this time around. I don't think the first party games have been as good for the most part, but I think Game Pass has paid off in spades for me, because I like to play lots of different kinds of games. So it's just been a perfect sweet spot for me. But, and I still very much believe in something like a Game Pass, and it may be Game Pass. Let's see what happens now that Diablo 4 is out and Call of Duty is coming out and, blah, blah, blah. And they've got a bunch of decent stuff coming out this year, but it may simply never work at all or the way they have it right now. I will say I was very pleased to see PlayStation Plus announce Immortals of Avium is coming in April, because I kept meaning to buy it.
Awesome
I'm like,
game.
oh, that's awesome. I want to play it. And I'm like, cool, I'll just play it on PlayStation Plus. But I have enjoyed the innovation and excitement around the ecosystem on Xbox, but you can't deny the fact that very few people are buying it. I mean, you saw the I don't know how accurate it was, but there was a GDC, some journalist, I think it was a game industry biz guy or something, was saying,
Christopher Dring.
Yeah, he was saying that, it's just absolutely flatlined in the UK or in Europe in general. Obviously, we know it's not making much noise and never has made much noise in Asia. And in America, it's probably doing as much as it's always done, which is middling. So if you are Xbox, I mean, the thing I've always said is Xbox's biggest problem, if you're trying to sell their hardware, is their exclusives are poorly managed and they don't have enough of them. And maybe they've turned the corner, and we'll see with Avowed, and we'll see with whatever the fuck they got coming out this year, Avowed and a couple
Hellblade, which is imminent. I think Indiana Jones later in the year.
Indiana Jones, right? We'll see. That could turn the tide. But without that, why would anybody buy your box that's not someone like me that's really fucking hardcore into Game Pass? And hell, if I can play Game Pass on my PC, if it's on PC, I'll play it on the PC. Because it literally is frictionless versus going, I got to hit the button on my capture card and then figure out, was it the input 1 or 6 that has the Xbox? I mean, I know it's nothing, but it's like, every little thing matters. Every little obstacle to getting you in game matters. And so I get why they would start thinking maybe we should just be a publisher, and maybe we should make a deal with PlayStation to put Game Pass on PlayStation and make it streaming for the games that don't run natively on PlayStation. And why the fuck not? Because they have Activision now, and they have all these companies now, and PlayStation gamers want to play those games. And then probably make more money that way, really. Because then anyone who wants to play Call of Duty has to subscribe to Game Pass. Right? They maybe would go, we're not selling it. It's just, you want to play Call of Duty? Cool. Give us $12, $10 a month, whatever it is, $19 a month. So I wouldn't be surprised, because they're fucking failing spectacularly, and they've done everything right except the games.
Yeah.
I mean, so if they don't, I know Phil Spencer's on record, whatever that matters, saying we're making another one, and I'm sure it's in development. But I don't think anybody would be surprised if they got out. Would you?
No, I don't think so. I think the writing's been on the wall, I think, all year, all calendar year, and really into December, when reliable people started saying, Hi-Fi Rush maybe, or something like this might be coming over, or Sea of Thieves.
Yeah.
And then there was the Blade reveal, which I thought was very weird, because they refused to say what platforms it's on. And I'm like, that's just strange. I don't understand why you won't say. So there's obviously something up with that game. And I think Indiana Jones will ultimately come over too. And so I just think that Phil and those people want to learn what they want to learn, but what they're going to learn is that people on PlayStation buy games. Grounded is now one of the best-selling pre-orders on PlayStation. Sea of Thieves is the best-selling pre-order on PlayStation and has been for some time. They're going to learn that they can make a lot of money in this space, and a lot more is going to come over. I'm pretty much positive about that at this point. So if you don't have the few exclusive differentiators of your platform, then I just don't see what the future of it really is. I've just kind of stopped talking about it in a major way, because I feel like the die is somewhat cast at this point. Now we're just waiting.
I think the only thing that could happen is if these games do come out this year and they're really good. If Avowed is the next Skyrim, if Indiana Jones is like, holy shit, that's fucking great. Call of Duty's day one. Spyro that they just announced they're working on is going to be an exclusive, and it's not going to be that long to come out. All right, maybe they got this year to really prove the Game Pass console connection. But I definitely think Game Pass is sticking around, but I think it's sticking around as a publisher, not as a console. Because like you said, if you don't have the exclusives, what good are you? And frankly, I think that's why PlayStation's going to be in some trouble if they can't figure out how to pivot. I think this is really interesting for PlayStation right now because you've got, Rise of the Ronin I haven't played, but I hear some people really like it and some people think it's like, it's okay. But Stellar Blade, I'm very excited to play. It looks really good. I haven't played the demo. It just came out today. And obviously Helldivers, because I don't do a lot of multiplayer, but what I've played I love, and it's clear that's working for them. And so it's quite possible that they have found a way if these three games really do well. And I know Rise of the Ronin's in the top 10, but like Dragon's Dogma 2 is number 2 and Ronin's like 8, right? So it's not like it's, bell of the ball or anything, but it's in there. But if they're like, hey, you know what? We don't have to break the bank every time to make these things. We can make commercial titles that are skirt the edge between AA and AAA, and gamers show up for those too. Then I think they're back in business. I think that's great. That's what I've been wanting them to do because I never made the video, but I made the thumbnail first, and it was about this year's PlayStation stuff. And it had, in the image was like Helldivers and Eve from Stellar Blade and one of the characters from Ronin. And it was so interesting to me because I loved looking at that and going, this I like. It's not that I like all the games necessarily, although I haven't played them all yet. But I like seeing that, back to diversity. I like seeing that variety coming from Sony again. It wasn't just another somber, not that, Returnal wasn't either, but although it was somber, but, they have rightly so been kind of associated as mostly these kind of cinematic non-gamer games, even though the gameplay is great in those games, but that's not how they get thought of and talked about. It was really cool to see 3 games coming from Sony that were like, these feel like games, man. These kind of are like, I'm interested in all of these. So maybe, I don't know if that's the legacy of Ryan. Maybe that's the legacy of Herman Holst. I don't know who you blame and or praise for those decisions, because none of these games came from first party. But somebody at Sony said, we have a vacant 2024. Let's open up the checkbook and get some of this stuff in here. And whoever did that, hopefully they're not just learning that was a good idea, but it's like, hey, our audience doesn't just need $300 million epics. They're good with cool games too.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by what Sony saw with Helldivers specifically because it was so long in development. It took over 7 years to make that game, and they were making it the whole time.
Helldivers 2.
Yeah, Helldivers 2.
Right.
And Stellar Blade's interesting because they obviously, that was announced for Xbox as well, and Sony obviously went in and secured that, which is pretty unusual for them to do that after platforms had already been announced. That's almost unheard of, actually. And obviously Rise of the Ronin, they have Team Ninja and Tecmo Koei or Koei Tecmo are they're so mercenary. It's funny. Like, I don't mind that. I think that's cool, but they'll work with fucking anybody at this point.
Yeah,
they'll take anyone's money. It's no problem at all. And they've always been like that. They were far up Xbox's ass early on in there, when they were just Tecmo before the.
I remember. What's the guy's name? The director of
Itadaki, or isn't it?
Gake?
Yeah.
He was at E3 once, and they had a specially made Ninja Gaiden, and at the end of it, what's the guy's name? Ryu, or whoever the hero is. It turned out what he was doing was breaking into a temple to steal a giant Xbox. Like it was a kind of like a ha ha ha, but it was like, yeah, I mean, they were all in on that on the Xbox One, if I remember. Or I think it was Xbox One. They were Ninja Gaiden, right?
Yeah, well, the original Xbox and Xbox 360 too. Like the Ninja Gaiden games were exclusive to Xbox. Those were really weird because they were not on PlayStation. Anywhere. I don't even think they had like the bespoke Japanese release like they did with some of the later Japanese. Like when Tales of Vesperia was an Xbox 360 exclusive, they actually did let them release it on PS3 in Japan, so that people would actually play it, I guess, there. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens with Microsoft. I feel like you and I agree on this, I think, and you had said it earlier. I think that based on the market at the time they were making these decisions, they made the right decision, which was we need to flip the table over and figure out a different way to sell games. Because we can't compete with the loyalism of Nintendo, and we can't compete with kind of the volume and the prestige of a PlayStation game. So we need to have a subscription model. And I think that they made a wise decision. I just don't think it panned out because I think it had a series of unintended consequences that they probably could have gamed out. Mostly, I think a lot of it came from what you were saying about Christopher Drink's piece, where it's like, people are just not buying games on Xbox to the volume they really need to be to make it a worthwhile place.
They don't have to.
Right. Well, but that makes the walled garden so high where it's like you either get into Game Pass or you might as well not even bother to
I think that
be here.
I would be stunned if you are saying that Microsoft genuinely had expectations that they were going to make a significant chunk of money from sales from games that they were also, quote, giving away for free.
No. I think that they gamed that out. I don't think what they might have gamed out, or maybe they had different outcomes in their calculus and they just went in one direction, was I don't know that they expected that games that were not in Game Pass would suffer so greatly on their platform by this idea that people will only subsume.
Oh, you don't mean first party. You mean
no? Yeah, everything. Like so. I think there are a few problems. Number one is I think Microsoft was opening the checkbook at first and paying a lot of money for games, but they never really got an amazing third party game on Game Pass ever.
No, that was their or first party game.
Right.
I mean, they
which
don't
is in their
make
control,
good games.
Yeah.
They make good enough games and they make some games that I love, but they are not consistent. They get lucky every now and then, but so far they have not been consistent. Even something, I love Tim Schafer, but even something like Psychonauts 2, Ratchet and Clank, which I think came out around the same time, Rift Apart, buried the fuck out of it. Not in terms of the writing and all that, but in terms of just the experience to play a game. It was a joy to play Ratchet and Clank 2. I finished that game. I never finish games, right? That was the fact that they were allowed to go so long and not solve that is ridiculous. It is batshit to me. I made a video years ago about it. I still don't understand how no one over there is just like, guys, we have all the pieces except the piece we need. Can we get great at making these games? I guess they couldn't.
No, I mean, I think it's harder than it seems. I think we kind of all intrinsically know that it's hard to make those kinds of games.
Of course it's hard to make those kind of games, but that's the job. I mean, I did it when I was in the industry. Connie Booth just got laid off. EA picked her up. You think Microsoft would have paid her?
Yeah, I saw that great acquisition on there. I was saying that on the show.
What are you doing?
Great acquisition.
You should have backed up all the money and she doesn't have to move. Just say fucking build a studio and where she is up north. What are you doing? But they seem to think they got a winning group with Matt Booty.
I think it's, that's the thing, is that I think it's pretty much done at this point. Like, I think that there are no, I think that it's funny. Jez Corden and I, the Xbox writer, we're having a conversation where we have totally different views on what exclusives will come over. But I think it's pretty much well understood that the age of true Xbox, like every Xbox game that's announced now people will be like, when is it coming to PlayStation? When is it coming?
Yeah.
to
why would they not release everything at this point? If you're going to release one, it's not like you're trying to buttress up your fucking hardware anymore. So yeah, put them all on PlayStation. Who gives a shit?
Yeah. I think to me, I think that that was the key piece of the chemistry that was not there, where like maybe the quality of the games, or maybe it was just never going to work at all. Like I think you could make an argument that there's just a limited subscription models, now that we've seen it borne out a little bit, have a more limited use. I think 10%, one in every $10, I think comes from game subscriptions in the United States. So it's not like a massive part of the games industry. And
but again, I the reason I remain and have been pro on that is that you're absolutely right. What I had hoped was that the business model would be successful enough because the big games would have been good enough. Like the fact that Starfield underperformed for a lot, I loved it, but a lot of people were like, played it, it's fine, moving on with my life. Assuming those big games would have been good enough to really bring a lot of people to subscribe to the service, whether on PC or whatever. What I had hoped to see was that the format would adjust and go, hey, we got to keep people from grinding off this service. So let's release, like they just put out a game, not first party, called Return to Grace, which is a game you can beat in like 3 hours, but it's great. It's not game of the year, but it's great. Or Hi-Fi Rush or whatever. I had hoped that ultimately that walled garden you're talking about would have been lower, because a lot of people complain and say, nobody plays that many games to merit a subscription versus just buying Dragon's Dogma for $70, owning it, and you don't have to worry. You're not going to play a game anyway for 3 months anyway. But I think games are mostly too long anyhow. So I was hoping that the format or the business model would adjust the content and we would start seeing those big long games, but we'd see more of these, 2 to 8 hour games. And that would actually lower the garden because you'd get more people playing because they need more stuff to play. But all of that was built on the assumption that their first party content was going to be stellar. I mean, and it hasn't been.
I think it just it all collapsed because the game quality is obviously one of the X factors, but I think they were never able to truly afford to get the major third party AAA game that they would have needed as like a marquee game to be like, they got good games. I loved Outriders. I thought Outriders was really cool. Yeah. Other games that the Drinkbox game, I can't remember the
not Guacamelee.
Nobody Saves the World. Like, these are little smaller games though, because, and I said this from the very beginning and people were naysaying, but I'm like, it's true. It's like, they don't want to sell the amount of money Microsoft have to pay for these games is so exorbitant. It just doesn't make any financial sense, which is why they had to start buying studios so they can absorb them and not have to really pay that price. But I think it's just all too late for them. I think it's just the ironic part, and you recognize this, and I did before the Activision deal ever went through. Is I'm like, they're making their imprint in Microsoft so big that they're not going to be ignored anymore, and you could see that they are not being ignored anymore. That people are going in there and saying like, you need to generate some requisite value compared to the rest of Microsoft here. We've given you, Activision isn't only the biggest acquisition in games history, it's the biggest acquisition in Microsoft's history. They spent way more on the company than they ever did on any acquisition ever. And so it's a thing that I think attracted a lot of attention internally. And I think it's like Embracer's problem in some sense, where it was like, the bigger you get, the bigger your nut is, like that you have to constantly justify yourself. And the bigger you get, the more often you have to justify your existence. So they just flew too close to the sun. And now they either have to put their games on platforms where they can make real money, and they can make real money. As Jez and I talked about, Halo Master Chief Collection on PS4 and PS5 will sell 5 million copies in like 2 seconds.
Imagine, that's so great.
Isn't that interesting? Like, just out of pure curiosity, that would be an insane. That game would pop back up on like the NPD list and shit like that.
Look, I'm surprised. I like Sea of Thieves. I only recently started playing it, but I'm surprised because that suggests that there's been a lot of people interested in that for the longest time, and they just couldn't play it. I'm like, really? I didn't know most people give a shit about that game, but because I never played it. But I played it for the first time after Skull and Bones came out, because people were like, Jaffe, no, if you want to play an online pirate game, go play that. And I was like, shit, this is really good. But I'm amazed that is sold so well. Like, the PlayStation audience has been looking at that going, we want that, but we can't have it. I guess so.
And it's like a Jenga tower that's about to collapse in some sense. It feels like, where like the more pieces you take out and give to the players around you, I don't know how they get out of it's not a death spiral. It's just like a place of permanent obsolescence compared to your competitors in some sense. I just don't know how.
You're talking about the console.
Yeah, the console itself. I think even
it's the first to fall of all, because they're all going away.
Yeah, I would say so. I just don't know how soon that's going to happen.
No.
And I think PlayStation is doing pretty respectably. So, and Nintendo is doing great considering how old their hardware is. And there's obviously a lot of pent up demand for what they have that's coming up that's new. So,
but comparatively though, if you get outside of our little echo chamber ecosystem, you can't be in that business and not be looking at the money that is being made from so many other video games that dwarfs the fuck out of what Nintendo. Alexa, stop. I'm going to unplug you, fucking moron. Nintendo does great, Sony does great, but my God, you look at the money that Fortnite makes and Roblox makes, and these kind of service-based evergreen games and I don't mean like service-based like, loot boxes and stuff. I just mean, the money that those games are making. Fortnite is still number one on the top 10 on the download list right now on PlayStation 5. So it's free, but hey, that's one of the reasons it's appealing. But you can't, that's where the money is, and mobile phone games and stuff. So I'm not saying I want people to not play console games. I'm just saying that if you're in that business and you're not looking at that stuff, I would suggest you're not going to be in the business for very long. Hell, they just announced today, Microsoft announced that PS5 is getting a native Minecraft.
Yeah, I saw that.
which is pretty cool. I mean, I don't, it's hard to tell. Who cares? It's Minecraft, but it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it is.
So.
I agree with you. I say this to the audience on Sacred. You might hear me. Is Helldivers 2 is a great example of like this really killer game that Sony will make a lot of money on, but it's still not exactly what they're looking for. Like, it's not.
No, they had what they were looking for. They just didn't know it in dreams. They were idiots, fucking morons. Man.
Well, yeah, learning more about how apparently the PC SKU was ready to go, and they made a bunch of very peculiar decisions from the get-go with Dreams. It was never going to work the way they launched it.
No.
The idea that they could have some sort of pipeline that you can get games on the PSN and just export shit and stuff like that, it would have been amazing. But they had no. I don't know what the fuck they were doing with that. It was very stupid.
I don't either.
I think it was like a half-baked Roblox. Like, you can see now in hindsight, that's why they kept it alive. Was there like maybe like Roblox? Maybe this could be. I'm surprised Media Molecule is still around, to be honest with you. But I guess we'll see the new game.
No, I mean, I think it could have, it could have gotten there before a lot of people got there, like Unreal with Fortnite Creator. That's an interesting story. I hope somebody will tell it one day, because I'm dying to know. It's like, well, you guys we're not smarter than you. Clearly, you knew this. You knew you wanted this on PC. You knew you could monetize this. Where did that get blocked? Why was it blocked? If we were in the same positions, would we have gone, oh, okay, I see that now. That makes sense. But because looking from the outside, it's like, you guys are fucking morons. That was your key. You could have literally had the YouTube of gaming. But Roblox got it, and now Fortnite's getting it. I don't get it, but
yeah, they were there. It's funny, they were there with PlayStation Home, and in some weird way too. They just didn't.
They were.
They didn't. They didn't quite capitalize, and now they have this Bungie albatross around their neck. Like, I don't think things look.
Yeah.
I'm so frustrated by the Bungie thing, just because it's like, okay, so everyone's going to leave. You're going to lay a bunch of these people off, and then you're going to take the company over in which you needed their expertise to help fix your games. So it doesn't make any sense at all. So people make fun of me, but I'm like, I really think Sony should just get out of this, like sell it at a loss, keep a percentage of it to make back that money slowly that they lost, and just be like, someone else can manage this better than we can. Like, we needed your help, and clearly you're not in the position to help us. And since we need to help you, you need to go, because we have a bigger fish to fry. I feel very strange.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I think there's clearly a very talented team there, but I mean, at this point, you're going to, Marathon could be brilliant, but I don't, nothing they've talked about so far makes me go, oh my God. It just looks like another extraction game with a really cool oxygen limiter versus a, battle royale dome closing in. And I'm sure it'll be more than that, but so far, that's all they've shown. I wonder if we're going to see, I guess they still have Concord on the boards.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they still have Jade's game on the boards. Mm-hmm. I wonder what the success of Helldivers 2 is going, because you know how it is. Success happens, and then everybody thinks who was involved with it, they know. Nobody fucking knows.
They clearly had no idea Helldivers was going to be big.
And so, but now it's going to be like, this is what we did on Helldivers, see? Or the producer of it, it's Sony. And it's just like, guys, I'm not saying nobody is capable of having knowledge that's come from success, but you usually learn from failure. You don't learn from success is usually what happens. But
do you think
that's a Jay-Z quote, but it's stuck with me.
Do you think Sony will buy Arrowhead, or try to, if they haven't already tried to?
I think they'll try to. I think they'll sell it. I mean, that's the problem with all this stuff, which is everybody's under the boot of capitalism. So if you offer a bunch of talented people a ticket for, they're set for life and their kids are set for life if they invest well, all they have to do is stick around for 5 years. They can branch off, do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So
totally.
Yeah, I think they will. I think it's stupid too. I mean, because what are you really getting with Helldivers 2? You own the IP. You could pretty much replicate Helldivers 2. I mean, it's not, it's great, but it's not like, it's pretty easy to, it reminds me a lot of when Kelly Flock was talking about Twisted Metal 3 and 4. And he was just like, Single Track came to him and said, we're going to take this code and we're going to take a bunch of they were trying to strong arm Sony. And Sony was like, fine, go make your own fucking car combat game. Because Kelly knew the brand at that point was strong enough. I think if Sony puts Helldivers 3 with a good team, it's not like there's some secret sauce that only Arrowhead knows. So I don't think they need to buy them, but probably will. Why not?
Yeah, seems to I would imagine it's probably more urgent now that it's clear the game is going to need a long tail support structure.
Oh,
around
yeah,
it.
that's true.
But I
That's
also
true.
think that Arrowhead could use that to their advantage, not only to attract, it's a pretty bad time to attract investment, but they could probably, I would imagine, this is very much like Supermassive with Until Dawn, where it was clear that people were knocking on their door, like Bandai Namco and others being like, you want to come do this for us? Didn't work out very well for them, but they did do that. And I wonder if Arrowhead's getting calls on the side too, being like, you guys want to get out of there and we'll give you a fucking shit ton of money to make a game like this for us. But I think that if I were them, I would be seeking that that purchase and that stability. They've made their game. Like they've made the game that will have an imprint for a long time. So I think now you just stick with it and take the security. So, and it's one of the very few teams that it would make any sense for Sony to buy. So
yeah, I mean, I'm sure they've offered. I mean, I'm stunned that we haven't heard yet, but unless they just don't want to be bought. But I mean, I get that, I suppose, but I don't really get that. I mean, at this point, when you're talking about if the Keyman contract is like 15 years, okay, I get it. But it's like 3-4 years. It's one game. It goes by in a heartbeat, and your bank account just continues to grow.
Yeah, and you're generationally wealthy, with options.
Who would not take that deal? You'd be a moron, I mean, let me ask you, the Last Stand Media has gotten offers, right? Somebody's already been knocking to buy you guys, right?
I've had people offer to invest in us, but not to buy it. No,
not to buy it. I mean, who would buy? I mean, like, who bought Rooster Teeth? What was that? Who owned
Full
that?
Screen, which I think was part of Warner, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Well,
okay.
They were independent, and then I think Warner bought Full Screen. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I don't know that. I've had people, offer to invest in I own the entire company. I'm not selling any piece of the company to anyone.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be valuable without me. In some sense.
No, but that's why you get signed to a Keyman, right?
Right. It's just such a weird business that I just think it is what it is. Like, I don't know that anyone can offer me anything that I wouldn't be able to kind of just get by sticking with it, unless they were really stupid with their money, and they
I know like Legendary went off and bought like Nerdist and stuff. I mean, there was a time like 10 years ago where you were seeing these podcasts get picked up and owned.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know what happened with Kind of Funny since I left, but no one really came to us to buy us. But again, people tried to invest money in us, but not for like pieces or for, some back end consideration. But I don't know if they got offered to be purchased either. I don't know how that went for them, but that was never I don't know what people see if they see that. I don't think people realize like we hide all the numbers really. So people don't even know like what they would be buying unless we had like a real discovery period and stuff like that.
Right. It's interesting though.
It's a quiet little, like Last Stand, I'm proud of it. It's like a quiet little machine. I think it does a lot better than a lot of people think even that it does, I'm
sure.
But it's
just the fact that you were saying Mike is in the other room recording Constellations. It's just like it's just the machine is working. It's like we're doing this content that's happening in the next room. It's
great. And
that's pretty cool.
A lot. Thank you. And a lot of it's up to the team too. Like Dustin and Ben are really great at keeping things moving. Everyone is good about timeliness. That's all I ask is like high quality, timely content. Otherwise, do whatever you want. It's going to be a problem. I mean, it's great. It's a great problem. But Dustin having a kid now in the summer, we're going to have to. I think it'll be Lockmore, but we have to find someone to kind of like come in and take his place for a little while as far as like the production back end stuff because it's vital.
What are the Dukes going to do now? Because when the Xbox goes away,
well, I think
it's going to be like those channels that it's like rock and then you tune in Monday and they've changed formats to country and you're like, what the fuck?
Right.
happened?
Yeah. Like the old radio stations. Yeah. We talked about this on their show. Is like, first of all, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. Like I think in the short to midterm,
Xbox
no. So I think
they say publisher.
Right. I think there'll be a place to talk about, but I was like, at the end of the day, like maybe we just, if really it was like push came to shove, we just give them a new brand or if they want to reset themselves or if we want to end the show at that point, like what, I don't know. There's a bunch of different options, but I'm not going to kick them out if that happens. I want them to do a show for me. It's just a matter of what it looks
Maybe
like.
Maybe there'll be a traitor like Dagan and leave.
Yeah. I'm sad about that, but
that's good though. He got an on-site job as an animator.
Yeah. In Philly, I think Comcast is based in Philly. So I think it's like some NBC related stuff.
Okay.
So
that's cool. He must be happy.
Yeah. I think he was getting it's just like games where I think it's bad. It's like really bad out there. And I think
he's still doing the other shows, which is great.
Yeah, because he can do it on Friday, and I'll record Knockback with him on Saturdays to accommodate him. Yeah. So And I told him
That's
he's
cool.
kind of like emeritus with punching up, where it's like if things, this job ends, you can come back. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So, well, we've been going for a while, Jaffe. I don't want
I'm
to take any more of your
tired,
time.
Colin Moriarty. Are you tired? What are you doing this weekend? Let's talk about that. What are you doing this weekend?
Well, Easter Sunday, so I'll be going to my aunt's, I think, for dinner. Tonight we're going out. We go out to dinner most Friday nights, so we're going to go out to dinner tonight. And I think tomorrow I'll just probably dick around. I got to do some yard work and get outside and like start cleaning things up a little bit better. But it's that time of year.
Outside is a good idea.
So yeah, what about you? What's happening?
I'm taking my kid tomorrow to see Midnight with the Devil. Is that what it's called? The thing about the talk show host that brings the.
Oh yeah, I saw that. A trailer or something for that.
Yeah, we were going to see that or Immaculate. We're going to see that. Then we're going to go browse some bookstores because I love bookstores.
Cool, me too.
And then I don't know, make dinner on Sunday, watch TV with the family. Just nothing, and then work. I like working on the weekends. I like making content and stuff on the weekends.
Yeah, I mean, I got to do that as well. I have to do the Q&A for this month and some ads, which are always interesting. Right. All right. Yeah. Well, we'll
so cool. Well,
yeah, go on,
I'll hit you guys up about the God thing. We'll do all that.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, for people that were asking, because I saw some people asking about that. Jaffe, I think, had computer problems. We were supposed to talk a week or two ago, but we're going to talk.
Yeah, my computer died. I just bought a brand new computer, and then the New York thing went well, I assume.
Yeah, it was great, dude. We'll have a video up for everyone of that soon. And the next show, I think we told you, we think we're going to do a show in San Diego. So obviously we'll incorporate you in a major way into that.
Oh, cool. That'd be fun.
Yeah. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I am going to go eat lunch and probably sleep. So
perfect.
Or play Stellar Blade.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah. No sleep. Yeah, I'm going to get going too. It's windy as hell outside. Maybe I'll take the dogs out. And yeah, Jaffe, we'll talk again soon. I appreciate you. I appreciate all of you out there for your love, kindness, and support. Thank you for joining us for our long-winded and winding conversation. It was fun.
Yeah.
We'll see you all again soon. Until then, goodbye.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.